Happy New Year, everybody. This is episode 37 of the Look Out Sir 40k podcast, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast produced, developed and or delivered by an assortment of friends, but most of all, the ones that are available within this intro now. And of those people, I speak about myself, Dan, obviously, because I am very self-absorbed and always looking to talk about myself wherever possible. But it wouldn't be a Look Out Sir 40k podcast without good old Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Hello.
Happy New Year, buddy. 2020. A new decade, as they say. Although I saw on the internet some people debating that it's not a new decade until 2021. Where do you stand on these things?
I'm not sure I understand the logic behind that. Surely it is a new decade now.
Well, potentially not. It depends, I suppose, whether or not you started the decade on the zero, i.e. the 2010, or if you started it on 2011, I guess.
Of course it's for zero, yeah.
Exactly, that would have been my assertion as well. But you never know. I mean, you know, all things are possible. How was the Christmas break for you, though, Phil? Did you have a lovely time? Do much with yourself?
No, it was very nice. Obviously visiting friends and family, that sort of thing. Very, surprisingly very little hobbying doing, but I did get quite a bit of hobbying received in gift format to me. Obviously because I had a birthday and a Christmas.
Obviously.
Because they were only a day apart. So I've got lots of models for my Augustine Crusade project we talked about on a previous podcast. So I basically now own all the Free Guild old Empire models that are kind of the basic infantry stuff. So the great swords, the handgunners, the halberdier kind of guys, and then also a corpse cart as well. I also threw in. So I've luckily got all of those. And then I also got the Sabbath World Crusades book, which is very fancy indeed.
Well, sounds very fancy. I don't remember the corpse cart being part of the free peoples.
Well, no, that's an extra one, obviously, for a slightly different side project. So that is for my, it's basically a Chaos Spawn I'm going to do that stalks the regiments. So the planet, if we're going back into it, the planet that the regiment is from a mortuary world where there's all these crypts and graves and stuff, and that's basically what the whole planet is full of. And then I'm doing the Thing in terms of the movie style monster that has spawned from all of these corpses. So I'm using the corpse cart to create a multi-human blob of people formed into one big, gelatinous moving blob, basically.
One big giant spider monster.
Yeah, it's inspired. If you ever Google the term Rat King, it's basically that, where in medieval period what you'd find is rats, I think basically when they're in close confines together, they would all defecate and urinate on themselves. And what happens is they end up somehow all sticking together. So they form this giant mass of rats that all just sort of move around as one big, almost weird creature. That is an actual thing that you can Google. And that's basically what's inspired it. So I'm using the corpse cart to create all these humans that are like stuck together that are going to form one big monster. Just as a one-off sort of model, just to create. I'm not particularly planning on playing it in any form, but it'd just be cool to have. And it will be part of the background behind the regiment sort of that I'm creating.
Magical stuff. And on the topic of a mass of human filth and debauchery glued together to form one form of sentient creature, of course we're joined by Joe. How's it going, Joe?
I'm good. That's a different kind of intro that I've had to the usual, but that's fine. I can live with that.
There you go. Do you not necessarily believe yourself to be an amalgamation of, individual organisms that come together to create one whole?
/ blob monster.
Yeah, / blob monster. I mean, blob monster is a fantastic way of describing you in many ways.
I'd be upset if that wasn't true.
I have made the critical error, Joe, of actually Googling what Phil was talking about. It is utterly horrific. I have no understanding why Phil would ever want to try and create a model that represented this absolute horror. But yeah, there you go. How was your Christmas break anyway, Joe? Did you have a lovely time?
It was very good, thank you. I didn't get any like hobby based like models.
Is that entirely true?
But I got two pop vinyls. The Warhammer one. I got another Dark Angel one, and the Ultramarines Intercessor.
There you go.
And that was it.
That wasn't it, though, was it, Joe? Because if you remember, you won the Lookout Sir's very first ever Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year and were gifted a red gobbo. So you got one of them.
That's the thing that won me the competition was gifted to me, and that was very nice.
I hate to interrupt, but I think, maybe you shouldn't give spoilers out, because surely we want to advertise people that might not have seen it to go and watch it.
No. At this point, I feel like we've hit mass saturation on that point. I think, it's been out there for a good week and a half now. It's a very Christmas-themed quiz, so by now, if you haven't already watched it, Joe won it. But, if you'd still like to watch it regardless, you can go onto our YouTube channel and check it out. I'm going to put the link in, I guess. But, I mean, yeah, we're not actually intending to speak about that retrospectively now. We've kind of done it, and we did it. And we hope that those of you who watched it enjoyed it. Albeit, we know that the audio quality was worse than usual, shall we say. Because I can't necessarily pretend that our audio quality is otherwise excellent. But obviously there was a lot of technical hurdles that we had to overcome to make that happen. And, bizarrely enough, audio was part of the process that I felt like I had a good solution to. And personally speaking, I can tolerate listening to it. But I understand that a few people out there might have been a bit like, oh, God, this is just a little bit too difficult to deal with. We had a couple of issues, like sometimes the audio didn't sync up quite correctly, sometimes it got super echoey, sometimes it rained, which made it sound absolutely awful. So yeah, audio is something that when we do it again, and we will do it again in 2020, that we will definitely work hard to improve. I say I'll work hard to improve it because, no one else has to worry about these sorts of things. I mean, Joe, were you in any way concerned by the audio?
I obviously wasn't concerned. Nothing phases me. And I had 100% faith in you, Dan, that you would sort it out.
There you go. Well, I didn't, but thank you very much. But how did you think the quiz went, lads? I mean, we're not going to make a big song and dance out of it, I suppose, but a few thoughts and feelings. Did you think it went well? Phil, were you a fan in the end? Did it go the way you wanted it to?
Well, obviously, I'd have liked it if I won the quiz. But I think we all probably thought that. But overall, yeah, it was really good. I think there was obviously some technical issues that because we've never done anything of that kind before, we couldn't really predict, and we were working with what we had.
Yep.
But I think the quality of it actually ends up looking pretty fantastic on the whole. Like the studio setup that we had. The formats, the actual quiz itself. Richie did a really fantastic job putting it together and sort of presenting it, despite having to wrangle like the five of us, because it was us three plus Tim and then Adam, who came along to help out with the quizzing and the scoring. So yeah, it came together really well, and obviously top marks for you for putting in an awful lot of effort to not only just set it up, but also to edit it all together afterwards in a kind of timely manner.
It's funny, I ran into Mikey from Hellstorm Wargaming at the Warhammer World thing we did a couple of days ago, and I was explaining to him, I was like, oh, you never understand what I had to go through to make that happen. He's like, no, I do that all the time. And I was like, oh, I'm so grateful that I just do a podcast. A podcast is so much easier than being a YouTuber. Being a YouTuber is painful. Yeah, obviously, humongous thank you to the good people at Triple Helix War Games. Phil spoke about the set. The set was within the confines of Triple Helix War Games. And the team there were amazing at helping out and, giving us stuff to have in the background or dress the set. We had loads and loads and loads of old box games, which was amazing. There were some real jewels amongst those box games that we had piled up in front of us. I think I even saw a Rogue Trader Space Marine amongst them, which was quite incredible. So I suppose obviously anyone watching at home can look out for those. But I mean, Joe, you were closely linked to the whole Triple Helix Wargaming fun and setting all that up. That was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really good. I've been hoarding and collecting those boxes for months, like the last 6 or 7 months, basically, because when we buy in all these second-hand armies, people tend to just send them in the original boxes, or they just pick up a box they've got lying around the house and send it over. So we kind of end up with this weird collection of stuff. And we managed to get some decent quality boxes, and we always thought about making a big collage wall for the store.
Mm.
So we were like, why not just do it for the big fat quiz?
Indeed.
Make a set out of it.
What was the name of the fella again? I feel terrible having forgotten his name, but what's the name of the fella who did all that?
It was Floris.
That was him, Floris. Thanks very much, Floris. You're an absolute gent. And then outside of obviously Triple Helix, obviously massive thank you to Adam as well, because Adam drove up from Bournemouth. I mean, what am I saying? He dialed in from Bournemouth to join us at the studio. Not live in person, obviously. There was no kind of green screen trickery or anything. That was him live on the phone. But yeah, obviously, massive thank you to Adam. His 40k brawl, beachhead brawl event is happening in a couple of weeks. And obviously, he came on to the Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year because he ultimately just wanted to plug that. So hopefully that did something for him in terms of awareness. Myself and Joe are definitely going along to that. Phil doesn't like ITC events anymore. He's had his fill of them, haven't you, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, just in tournaments in general, I'm getting a bit weary of. I'm all about the fun and frolics of painting and narrative. Until, obviously, you guys twist my arm and I end up going to another Warhammer GT, no doubt.
Well, indeed. Well, it's only a week away, mate, and you're going to be at another one.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, once that one's done, though, I think I'd rather not do GTs and do, for example, the doubles events or the team events, stuff like that. They'll be a bit more enjoyable and less pressure on trying to come up with.
Me and Joe do not support that decision, but we understand. Isn't that right, Joe?
Yeah, it's just all hardcore all the time.
That's it.
Yeah. To be honest, I did have a discussion about my weariness of competitive 40k. But it's one of those, like, I'll go and do a fun event, but you can't switch it off, and you just destroy everyone, and then everyone hates you. So
that's not why everyone hates you, Joe. Ha ha ha. But yeah, so massive thanks to Adam, though. Obviously, cool that he came along, and obviously, thank you very much to all the guys who contributed. Obviously, we had Toke do a video for us, which was amazing. We had Sean as well. And obviously Sean isn't the most comfortable when it comes to filming himself or presenting himself in that kind of way, so for him to do that for us was amazing. And then in addition to that, we had Sam from the Codex, we had Warren from On the Tabletop / Beasts of War, we had Winters SEO, and Mikey from Hailstorm Wargaming. So obviously massive thank you to all those guys. If you're listening, that was super cool. And I obviously also have to say a massive thank you to my wife, who at the very last minute decided that she would be available to come along and assist with all of the behind the scenes technology stuff. So obviously I can't not throw out a humongous thank you to her for tolerating all our silly nonsense for a day. Because it's hard enough for her to have to put up with the fact that I, squirrel myself away and do this podcast multiple times during a week. But for her to lose an entire weekend and then the 2 days running up to Christmas was something of a big thing. So obviously massive thank you to her as well. But yeah, look, I mean, we weren't here to talk about all that stuff. If you'd like to check it out, I'll keep the link in there. Obviously, you know the result, but it's still fun to watch. Hopefully, those of you who did watch it and really enjoyed it. And we promise to come back bigger and better in 2020 when we come towards the end of this wonderful year that lies ahead of us. But on the topic of this year and where we're up to so far, we've chosen these topics to talk about, which are as follows. We're going to be talking about the Eternal War missions. Last time we talked about Maelstrom, and you all heard our opinions on that. Joe wasn't there to give his opinions, but you played some Maelstrom the other week, didn't you, Joe? What do you think of Maelstrom now having played it? Are you in favour of it?
I actually quite like the new Maelstrom. I obviously didn't listen to our podcast or read the rules before we played, so I kind of suffered a bit by not knowing anything that was going on and having my opponents teach me. But having now played them and got a grasp of it, it's actually a lot more enjoyable, because I obviously didn't set my deck before we started playing, and my opponents did set their deck, and they all had really good cards, and I had terrible cards. So it was kind of like old versus new in that way.
Did you not take a couple of cards out beforehand? I thought you did.
I just took like 6 out. And I was
that's
like,
that as well, though. I mean, that's all I did. I just took out the ones I definitely wouldn't be able to do, like removing the Psyker, kill the Psyker one, kill something with the fly keyword. I didn't customize it to the point where, like Richard and I think Dan did, where they like stripped out a load of the secure objectives and stuff like that.
I actually think it's best actually played, if you want to go competitive with it, is actually just run the minimum 18 cards.
I totally agree with you, which is what I did. Although I lost to Phil, so...
Yeah, run the minimum 18.
Non-competitive player? Oh my god.
I know.
Yeah, I'd say run the minimum 18 and only have, like, kill cards in there, and like random other stuff that have to do with your army that you know you can achieve.
Yeah.
Like, don't bother with holding. Like, definitely don't have defend cards in there. And like hold objective ones, like they're kind of a waste of time when you know that you're definitely going to get a kill in a turn. So just take those.
I think the secure objective ones can be quite good because they're worth 2 points.
Supremacy is a good one just to have in there as a failsafe because it can become useful. But I feel like this is all the sort of stuff we talked about in the last episode. In fact, I know it is. So if you haven't listened to us talk about Maelstrom in the last episode, rather than us do it now, why not go and check that out in episode 36? There you go, cheap plug. So yeah, we talked about Maelstrom last time. Now we're going to talk about Eternal. And then we're also going to talk about the Christmas Day reveal that the good people of Warhammer community did. Not a huge amount from a Warhammer 40,000 perspective, but we're going to talk about that and give our opinions on that as well. So yeah, I'd say that pretty much wraps it up. The only other thing worth mentioning is that next weekend we're going to be the three of us at the Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament Finals, and we're going to be talking about that in the following episode as a wrap-up piece. So we were thinking about talking about what we were going to go with and how we're going to do it, but Phil hasn't really made his mind up. I haven't really made my mind up, and Joe really hasn't made their mind up. So between the three of us, we're all a bit muddled and confused with less than a week and a half to go.
Well, mine and your predicament, Dan, is that we're not sure which one of two armies we take, and if one takes one, the other one can't take it.
Well, that is true. That is true. I mean, it's essentially what the situation is, but we'll talk about that in the next episode. But as for today's, as I say, we're going to talk about Eternal, we're going to talk about the Christmas Day stuff, and then we're going to pretty much wrap it up there. So, with no further ado, let's transition now to talking about Eternal War. Thanks very much, everybody. Woo! Welcome back, everyone, in this part of the podcast, if it wasn't immediately clear, given the fact that this bit comes immediately after the intro, and on the assumption that you listened to the intro, you will know that we are now going to be talking about the Eternal War missions found within the pages of Chapter Approved 2019. And joining me to talk to this, about this particular part of the Warhammer 40,000 hobby is, of course, Phil. Hello, Phil.
It is I.
It is you. There you go. And Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Fairly decent.
Fairly decent. Well, that's as best we could hope for. So yeah, Eternal War, it is, by all accounts, the more kind of standardised, competitive variant of Warhammer 40,000. Obviously, we spoke about the virtues of Maelstrom and played quite a bit of Maelstrom over the last week or so. But, you know, Eternal War is relatively where it's at. I mean, I've got to get somewhat familiar with this rule set because, well, we all do, because we're all about to go playing it throughout the weekend at the Grand Tournament Finals. But, yeah, what was your relationship with Eternal War up to this point as it concerned Chapter Approved 2018? Were you fans? Were you into it in the past? I mean, Joe, what did you think of Eternal War up to this point?
I played so much of it. I think I was Eternal War nonchalant. I was neither happy and excited, nor was I sad about it, because it just seemed to be the only thing that I ever played. So that just became like ground zero for me.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I played it so much, like I kind of knew the missions inside out. But now, having started to read these ones, all that information is being pushed out of my brain and no longer useful. So my recall for it is awful.
That is true. How about you, Phil? From the outset, what was your relationship like with Eternal? You a big fan?
I think the very first set of Eternal War missions were, with the relic and stuff, were a bit tiring. The last year's, or now 2 years ago, so the 2018 chapter approved Eternal War missions I really liked. They felt a lot more balanced and a lot more interesting than previous iterations of Eternal War missions. It felt like they were really doing something different this time. And then this seems to just be refining that concept a little bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, the Eternal War missions have been pretty up and down. I think early doors, it was very clear that there was a heavy emphasis on he who go first wins, because, sudden death was a thing. Various other variables meant that ultimately the best way to play was just to be full-on aggressive 100% of the time. And then, the 2018 chapter approved rule set, got rid of a lot of the weirder aspects of it, but still, featured a few interesting additions, but, definitely made it so going second had become much more of a viable option, and in many people's opinions was probably the best way to potentially win. And now what we have in 2019 is much more of a mixed bag, I suppose. I mean, 2019 now features a mixture of formats where sometimes going first is best, sometimes going second is better. So yeah, no, it's interesting to see that variety. So with that as a talking point, I suppose we may as well get into it and start talking about the Eternal War side of gameplay. So a lot of the stuff will carry over between all the Eternal War missions. So every single Eternal War mission features the three standard secondary win conditions, which is Slay the Warlord, First Strike, and Line Breaker. I'm going to assume you don't need a huge amount of detail on what those are, but basically put not seize control, I'm reading the first mission. Slay the Warlord is when you kill your opponent's Warlord, and you get a victory point for that. First Strike is when you kill something in the first battle round, so that doesn't have to be your first player turn. That can be in either your turn or your opponent's turn. As long as you kill something in that first battle round, you get one victory point. And then Line Breaker is at the end of the game, where the game is concluded. If you have a model anywhere within your opponent's deployment zone, you also gain a victory point. So that is pretty much universal across the board. In all of the instances, you have to have a battle-forged army. That is a essential element, so your armies always have to be battle-forged. And then most of the other elements alter from there, although deployment stays the same, which is, as we described in the Maelstrom episode, there is still the same new attacker-defender thing. But assuming that you didn't listen to the Maelstrom issue, or rather, segment of the podcast in the last episode, I guess we probably need to describe how that works. So, Phil, do you want to do the honours and talk about how deployment works in the general sense in Eternal?
Well, I got the impression that it actually varies from mission to mission, because it quite often
You are 100% correct. I've just literally picked this up and gone, oh no, wait, I'm completely wrong about that. So we can talk about that in each instance. First turn is the thing that stays the same, not the deployment setup. So
so the attacker always decides if they take the first turn or not, and then the defender can seize.
There you go. That was my my mistake there. But also acceptable casualties is also an effect in all these missions as well. So again, you will not lose the game if you have more points than your opponent, but they kill everything in your army. So that's always pretty cool. So let's begin, shall we, with the first of the Eternal Will missions, the Crusade. Joe, do you want to do the honours and tell us what Crusade is?
Crusade is a brand new mission incorporating elements of several that have come before it. Although initially this mission may appear to have simple victory conditions, players will quickly find that holding an objective marker until the start of their next turn is no easy task, and so any that you wish to score victory points from will have to be well defended from the enemy onslaught that will surely come.
I mean, that was beautifully done.
That was awful.
No, I think you delivered that with a sense of dignity and grace, so that was very good. So, what are the unique victory conditions, Joe, of Eternal War?
Okay, so at the end of the game, the player with the most victory points is the winner.
Of course.
Both players have the same. The game is a draw. Victory points are scored for the following. Seize and control. Starting from the second battle round, each player scores 1 victory point for each objective marker they control at the start of their turn. A player controls an objective marker if they have more models within 3 inches of it than their opponent does, and then slay the warlord first strike for line breaker.
And how many objective markers are available in this mission, Joe?
A number.
He doesn't know this. It's 6, Joe. It's 6.
It is 6.
So essentially, at the start, the players roll off, and starting with the winner, alternate placing objective markers until 6 have been set up. Each objective marker must be set up anywhere on the battlefield more than 12 inches away from any other objective marker and more than 6 inches away from the edge of the battlefield. So there you go. So it is a 6 objective marker game. Each objective marker is worth 1 victory point at the beginning of your player turn, starting from battle round 2. So quite an interesting one. Not necessarily the most devastatingly difficult one to wrap your head around, but as the beautifully worded and well written, or rather well read, see I can't even talk, segment that Joe kind of spoke us through at the start there, it is actually very, very difficult to be able to hold on to objectives under these conditions. So, I mean, from a tactical perspective, what do you reckon of that then, Joe?
Well, you're not going to be just sending out a squad of guardsmen or a 5-man intercessor squad into the middle of a table and hoping it's going to hold it for a turn, because your opponent is just going to jump on it and absolutely destroy it. I think this mission lends very strongly to a defensive gun line army. If you deploy your objectives correctly, you can end up with 2 or 3 objectives in your own deployment zone, which you can just sit on like a squid, just blob out and hold on to those continuously for the whole game. As long as you've got the long range firepower to make sure that your opponent stays off any middle objectives and 1 less in their own deployment zone. So an artillery guard army would do quite well with this. Although assault-based armies will struggle. Well, they struggle with any kind of objective holding mission. They benefit more from the score at the end of your turn, though. They can just jump on it and then sacrifice a unit. They're not going to want to sit still for a turn.
What's interesting about this as well, though, is the sequence in which it's done, right? So obviously you make the battlefield, then you deploy the objectives. Now, this means that we're going back to the olden days where you can put these objectives anywhere. There is no more gentleman's agreement. So if you're up against an Imperial Knight army, you can still whack these things on top of buildings and be like, sorry, mate, it's what it is. But in addition to that, the way that they've kind of sequenced it, it's now slightly more difficult to assume that you can position the objective markers in such a tactical way that you can always guarantee that you're going to get an advantageous situation. But at the same time, there are obviously going to be optimized ways that you're going to be able to deploy the objectives that you have control of in order to, greatly increase the chances that you're going to be optimized for your army, for sure. Again, it's really interesting how that return has come about, because I know in the 2018 chapter approved, they were quite adamant that they wanted to get away from people being able to, muck people around and leaving stuff out of range of people, or creating situations where you lose the game in the placing of objectives before you've even had a chance to do anything. But this is quite interesting that they're kind of going back to that. I mean, Phil, are you surprised that they went back to that, or do you think that's just one of those things that they forgot all about and made a bit of a mistake on?
I'm a little bit surprised, actually, because until you mentioned it, I didn't even notice that. And then I've just been looking through, and it looks like it's the same for the Maelstrom missions as well, because you set up the terrain first and then place the objectives.
There are some very specific circumstances in some of these missions where that is not the case, but for this one, you can just put them wherever you want to put them.
Which is a bit odd, because I quite liked it when it sort of had to go on the ground floor, just to kind of keep things a bit more fair. Because obviously some terrain is a bit mad, and especially some of the newer, like the Imperial sector stuff. You pretty much have to use your full movement just to go up to the top floor. Means trying to grab an objective up there is quite difficult, or trying to get down from up there is always going to be quite difficult. So, yeah, having things on the ground floor just seem a bit more sensible. So it's a bit odd they've not incorporated them in. And I wonder if it's because a lot of these missions, and it doesn't actually say this one, it just sort of says Crusade's a brand new one, incorporating different elements, whereas a lot of the more historical ones that weren't in Chapter Approved 2018, so if it was from 17, for example, I could see why it might have not had that element to it. Yeah, it's a bit odd. I presume they know what they're doing and there's a reason why. Or I would have been expecting a more like just generic rule at the beginning of this that said how you couldn't do that. But obviously that's not there.
No, not by my reading anyway. I mean, again, I could be wrong. There might be something in there, or an FAQ or a rata that makes that clear. But no, there's nothing in here that I can see that states that. So yeah, I mean, in terms of tactical flexibility, again, this is a mission that will further increase the viability of armies with access to the fly keyword. I think, again, this is going to be really great for Blood Angels. It's interesting that Joe talked about gunline armies, but things like Blood Angels, where they're all just rocking loads and loads of jump packs and just want to get stuck in, they're going to have a great time with this mission, because they just go everywhere and hold down stuff. I mean, I think Tau players and gunline armies are actually going to really struggle with this, because, again, with some very easy tactical placing of objectives, you can create situations where your opponent is really stuffed. I mean, for example, you could, position an objective on the very, very top of like one of these like ruins or whatever that Tau so love to sort of stick to. And in doing so, you can create a situation where they're having to commit to having units higher up on ruins in order to hold the objective, but ultimately you're kind of dictating where you want them to go. But equally, you can sort of position stuff in such a way as you could because of the area of effect that you're not allowed to enter into. You can kind of put things out in the open where you think the Tau will want to go, and then create situations where your opponent isn't just able to kind of sit on an objective in a ruin. I mean, again, it depends how able you are to manipulate that, and there's going to be a lot of luck involved in certain things. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting again to be going back to that scenario. I mean, I haven't sat down and done the geometry or the maths yet, but I'm sure there is an optimized way that you can position all these objective markers, or the 3 objective markers you control. But even with just a little forethought, knowing what your opponent's looking to do, you can probably very quickly manipulate the way the game is going to go. So that's interesting.
Yeah. I think, Tau I think are going to be one of the ones that are going to struggle on this anyway. Because if you can make sure that those objectives are quite nicely spread out, Tau don't like that. They like to be squished together in a blob, in a little mound somewhere. So having to force them to spread out, which then also reduces the effectiveness of their shield drones and stuff, because they've got to spread them out between lots of different units. If with some good placement, you can kind of like isolate and lock down different parts of their army, which is nice.
Well, again, I mean, it's like you say, if you can draw Tau forwards onto objectives, there's only going to be so much that's going to be able to hold those objectives, and you can concentrate fire on those units and cause them all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't require using characters to hold objectives, but actually this is one of those missions which will favour using characters being then screened by some other unit. So you've got a unit and a character, for example, maybe on an objective, just so your characters may be more likely to be a bit more survivable, because you can't just easily target all the units, especially if there's a bunch of units, not just that one but others in the army. So it's one of those ones where if you got units, you kind of want stuff out of line of sight or in cover, all the standard stuff really when you're on an objective, but sort of more so on this because you need to make your unit on an objective extra survivable, and then you need the ability to take your opponents off of theirs. So, you know, things like line of sight, ignoring weapons is going to be really powerful, or the ability to like charge in and sort of take an objective off someone. But even then, you've still got to hold it for another round on top of that. So, but then it means you're sort of stopping them from scoring at the very least.
No, indeed. There's some interesting tactical opportunities with that one, though. Not a bad one by any stretch of the imagination. Interesting, though, that, as I say, that we're going back to the times where you can start to muck around with objective markers and cause people some headaches. I mean, Imperial Knight armies are not going to thank you for that, and various other armies are not going to thank you for that. There's stuff that you can exploit there quite easily, which is going to be interesting in a couple of weeks' time, I'm sure, because I'm sure everyone will be looking for those advantages. So something to take away from there. So the next one is Scorched Earth, which is a mission that you may remember from Chapter Approved 2017. But there have been some differences made, and maybe Phil would like to talk us through that momentarily.
So it says Scorched Earth was originally published in Chapter Approved 2017. Updated here, this mission forces players to make important tactical choices each turn. Should they try and hold an objective for one more turn, or should they play it safe and raise it to the ground, scoring some immediate victory points but losing it for the rest of the battle? Similarly, an important decision must be made on how aggressive a battle plan will be adopted, as capturing an enemy objective offers a great reward but could leave your own objectives open to a counter-attack. So this is, I presume it's only been tweaked from its previous edition, where you basically have an option to raise or control an objective. So the victory points, I'll read that out. So control or raise, starting from the second battle round, each player scores 1 victory point for each objective marker they control at the start of their turn. If an objective marker is within the enemy's deployment zone, you may choose to raise it if you can control it. Doing so scores you 3 victory points instead of 1, but the objective marker is then removed from play, basically from the battlefield. A player controls an objective if they're within 3 inches, as normal.
So where this mission has been altered is, first of all, the start of player turn stipulation. So that's new. So that wasn't in 2017. And the big difference is in the deployment of the objective. So I don't know if you want to read through that, because that is a big change to how this works.
It's a big chunk, so I'll read through it. The players roll off, and the winner decides who will be the attacker and who will be the defender The defender determines the deployment map, so you roll it as normal, then selects their deployment zone, and the attacker uses the other deployment zone. And then starting with the defender, players alternate placing objective markers until 6 have been set up. The first objective marker that each player sets up must be more than 12 inches away from any other objective marker, more than 9 inches away from a player's deployment zone, and more than 6 inches away from the edge of the battlefield. So if I remember rightly, that's sort of like in the middle line between
pretty much smack bang in the middle, yeah.
The remaining objective markers that each player sets up must be wholly within their own deployment zone, more than 12 inches away from any objective marker and 6 inches from the battlefield edge. The attacker then deploys first, and then the defender deploys their entire army, and obviously must be within their deployment zone. Yeah. And then the attacker gets to decide who goes first or second.
So what that effectively means now is that you know what your deployment zone is, and you have to place 2 objectives in your deployment zone. Previously, the way it worked was you placed the objective markers with no idea where the deployment zone was going to be, and you could end up with a situation where one guy had 3 objectives in his deployment zone and the other guy had none.
I remember getting stung quite badly with that, where most of them were in mine, and I was up against a super aggressive Elder army that managed to go first and then basically steamroll in and raise a bunch of objectives on the first turn, and I was like, oh great.
Yeah, so that change is pretty significant, and it turns this into a really interesting kind of back and forth, I suppose, because you know that 2 objectives are in your enemy's deployment zone, and you know you're looking after 2 in yours, and then obviously you also know that there's the ones in the middle ground which are kind of, you know, neither here nor there. But, you know, the fact is that, yeah, it does actually get quite tactically interesting in terms of what you can do. I mean, Joe, what do you think of this? Is this more exciting these days for you?
I think this is a good one, actually. I think this one's quite comfortably aimed towards the Marine list, which enjoys being in the mid-table. If you can position your 2 objectives kind of like on heavily set on one side, so that you've got this weird little triangle going on where you can hold free, but position most of your force in the central one, then you can really restrict what your opponent does in moving, and then you can kind of like creep out with these little tendrils to kind of like raise stuff, or even put yourself in a position where you can hold all 4 of the central ones.
Yeah, it's very interesting for sure. I think it's in terms of like how you approach it tactically. I think probably the most sensible way to approach this is to go very aggressive very early. But then at the same time, that can obviously backfire on you, because if your opponent weathers your aggression and then just, you know, pushes back even harder, that can be quite interesting. Because this one's going to be an interesting one for reserves, for example. Because having maybe like back in the day, I say the day, it was only like a year ago, probably not even that. You know, there was a lot of people getting a lot of mileage out of Death Guard Terminators. Because they were super tough and really, really difficult for most people's like backline stuff to deal with, and there could definitely be an argument for those guys making a return with something like this, because if you've got a bunch of tactical Marines or intercessors or even like guardsmen hanging in the back lines as the rest of the army goes on the attack, having something like that coming in as a counterpunch is going to cause you a lot of headaches very, very quickly. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how you deal with that for sure. I'm curious to think how my Grand Tournament Finals army will work in this one. I assume I'm just going to run forwards and go smashy, but we'll see. We'll see what occurs, I guess.
Yeah, because you really need to. Again, it's the same with the Crusade one. You need to be on the objectives at the end of your turn 1, so you can try and score it from turn 2.
Yeah.
And trying to get on your opponent's ones are going to be really difficult. But when you do get on them, you pretty much always want to raise the objective, I reckon. Unless you know you're going to comfortably steamroll them and you're going to be able to sit on their objectives for more than 3 turns, So you've got to be on it from basically turn 2, and then hope that you get to like 5 to 6 turns.
Yeah.
Like you might as well just raise it for the big win.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it absolutely is as soon as you get into their ranks, as soon as the opportunity is offered to you, raise it, because it gets you free victory points. It's not D3, it's a flat free, which is a big jump, because in a turn, if you got both of your opponents, say you had some ridiculously aggressive obsec thing that got into your opponent's lines in turn 1 and stayed there till turn 2, and you were able to sack both of their or raise both of their objectives, that obviously means that gives you a 6-point jump in a turn, which is going to be really hard for your opponent to catch up from. So yeah, no, it's interesting, man. I think as soon as you get there, you got to raise. Absolutely, you can't gamble on not. It has to be done.
I'll tell you who'd be good at this mission. The double moving Gene Stealer blob.
Oh yeah, they'd be amazing.
Because if you just line them out across the table, know when your opponent to place them, and just go move, advance, charge, and then because you're still a troops, just hope that you obsec your opponent out of those objectives, and then just raise them straight away, and then you go, cool, I'm just going to sit on the back line now and laugh at you.
The old Alpha Legion cultist bomb would be amazing on this as well.
God, yeah.
Something like that would be really frustrating. But there you go. So there you are. There's that one. I think it's really interesting. I mean, again, definitely a notable improvement from its 2017 variant, because, again, in 2017 it was scored at the end of your player turn, and in 2017 you could end up in really stupid circumstances where you may not have access to anything worth getting. And also, I think in 2017, raising an objective was worth D3, which I didn't like either, because it just made it sometimes not even worth doing. So, yeah, there you go. So I will now tell you what Ascension is, because that is another mission that is available within Chapter Review 2019. And like the one that came before, the good old Scorched Earth, Ascension was also in Chapter Approved 2017. In this mission, players can score more victory points by holding an objective for consecutive turns with their characters. The objective placement means players must commit to the centre of the centre of the table, but careful movement and layered defence can ensure an objective remains defended to allow your character to score consecutively. Words. The point is you've got to commit your characters to the middle of the table and hope that they don't get messed up. But if you do well, you'll do well. So how that looks in terms of the deployment anyway, the players roll off, the winner becomes either an attacker or a defender. Attackers deploy first and have the option to go first or second, depending on how they feel, and the defenders determine the deployment zone and decide where they're going to be deployed. Once that's all been done, the players then place 3 objective markers on the battlefield as follows. The first objective marker is placed in the centre of the battlefield. Then, starting with the defender, the players each place 1 more objective marker. These must be set up more than 15 away from any other objective marker, more than 6 away from the edge of the battlefield, and equal distance from both players' deployment zones. So basically, they're also in the middle. The attacker deploys their entire army, defender, blah blah blah. We already talked about that. So yeah, you've got all 3 objective markers in a line in the middle of the battlefield. That's the beginning of the whole thing. And then when it comes to victory conditions, well, there's 2 things to be aware of in this. First of all, there's direct command. So if only one player has any character models within 3 of an objective marker, they control it even if there are more enemy models within range of that objective marker. If an enemy unit with a similar ability is within range of the same objective marker, that objective marker is controlled by the player who has the most models within range of it as normal. So characters do not trump OBSEC. They just themselves have a version of OBSEC. So, 2 tactical marines will still get priority over 1 chaplain. But, it's just interesting that's in there. So, yeah, victory conditions. Ascend. Ascend. It's weird that they've not bolded out Ascend in this. Does anyone else notice that? That was weird.
No, you're right, though.
Oh, yeah.
A slight little, formatting error there, but we will continue. So Ascend. Each player scores 1 victory point at the end of each of their turns for each objective marker they control. A player controls an objective marker if they have more models within 3 of it than their enemy does, basically. Furthermore, if a player controls the same objective marker with the same character for more than one of their turns consecutively, the number of victory points scored is increased. They score 2 victory points at the end of their turn for an objective marker that has been controlled with a character for 2 of their turns consecutively, 3 points if it's been controlled with a character for 3 of their turns consecutively, and so on. So within a 7-turn game, it is possible to score 6 victory points for one objective in 1 turn, should a character remain on it for 6 turns. Ooh! So that one can get a little bit out of control, potentially. What do you think of that, Joe? What's your opinion on the Ascension?
It's a good mission. I think it's strong. I think it suits support characters really well. So not your Captain Smashers who charge in and go and destroy stuff, although he is a good one for going in to clear the deck. But people like Apothecaries and Company Ancients, stuff like that, that can't be targeted, but are quite happily just stand still doing nothing for an entire game. And like things like Weird Boys, stuff like that they themselves don't do anything, but they just fling other units around the table. If you just get those in the middle, then they have a bit of a field day. The other one is Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights, because they're all characters. Although you'd have to, because if in like a tournament, you have to choose your warlord traits in advance. So you'd have to choose the houses that basically counted him as 10 models. So your opponent would have, so you'd have to put your knight directly on top of the objective, so people could only get in range of it from certain sides, and then you'd have to count yourself as 10 models, and you should be okay.
With those rules, does the knight also count as OBSEC plus the model counts?
So he counts as a character because people spend the stratagem.
No, I mean normally though, does he count as OBSEC?
Yeah, he does. Normally, he gains OBSEC and counts as 10 models.
Yeah,
that's quite good.
It is pretty reasonable, but it's one of those ones where it never ever feels that worthwhile, but until it is worthwhile. But yeah, it's circumstantial, but in the circumstances where it works, it's definitely strong. There have been plenty of occasions where I've played Imperial Knights where I wish I had that, but equally it's not mattered in the majority of games, so it's one of those. But I think Joe's right. I think the mid-tier characters, the support characters, are definitely going to be valuable for this kind of thing. What's interesting is, outside of the forces of the Imperium and maybe Chaos, those kind of support characters are fewer and far between. I know from a kind of Elder perspective, HQs are very, very sort of utilitarian. They're very necessary to a lot of strategies and a lot of gameplay, so you always rely on them to do a lot of heavy lifting. So you need those to be quite mobile. Tau, they're very stationary, so they don't really want to kind of have to commit characters to the mid-table, because obviously Tau don't really want to go anywhere near the mid-table, so this is another mission that I think really doesn't do Tau any favours, because now all of a sudden they've got to come up with ways of getting into the middle of the board and being functional in that space. So and Tau don't want that. Tau want to be shooting you lots and lots and lots from turn 1. So you could definitely pull off a few cheeky wins against Tau.
I don't know. I've gone up against Tau in the last GT, and with the certain Tau seps, they can sort of move, run, and still shoot as if they were stationary, I believe. And from turn 1, they can be in the middle as a big blob.
Yeah, but they don't tend to like to be that way. They tend to like to stay at the back and shoot you with lots of rail cannons and missile pods and things. I mean, the downside with this one is you need characters that are pretty fast moving, because all the objectives are going to be 12 inches away from your deployment zone, and they're basically going to get onto that for the end of your turn 1, so you can start scoring it from turn 2.
if I'm remembering that rightly. You've got to, even if you're a normal model, you've got to move in advance, and you're unlikely to get there.
Yeah.
Or you might if you're lucky, because you've got to be 3 inches away, up to 3 inches. So you need something that isn't just infantry to get you up there from turn one. Or do you play it a bit safer and not necessarily commit for turn one and just sort of focus on shooting turn one and then moving up for turn two and stuff? But then you could potentially leave your opponent to kind of run away with it, basically.
Yeah.
Blood Angels could be a good one for this, because you kind of allow you either allow your opponent to commit to the center, and then you just throw a bunch of crazy close combat elites in who are supported by a lot of characters, or you just first turn move your entire army into the center of the table and just be like, well, come to me then. You don't want to do this, but you got to come to me.
Yeah, I mean, because again, I mean, yeah, if you took like a massive 10-man unit of Sanguinary Guard, for example, and then had the Sanguinary Guard Ancient giving them Feel No Pain 5+, and then you just whack that guy in the middle on an objective out of the way, no one's going to want to go towards them, because if you go towards them, they'll just run at you and murder you. But that's 20 wounds with a 2-up save and a 5-up Feel No Pain. Guarding a character that has 4 wounds, a 2-up save, and a 5-up Feel No Pain, and it's just that sort of madness that you could literally like be like, whatever. I'm just gonna stick these guys in the middle and just go see what happens. Because if I can leave the Ancient with the 5-up Feel No Pain banner on the objective for 2 or 3 turns, that's going to give me such a swing in terms of points that because obviously it's one point for the first turn, then that turns to 2, which gives you 3 cumulatively, and then if you can keep them on their 3 turns, then you're up to 6 victory points for just having sat one character on there for multiple turns, just surrounded by a lot of very hard to move models. So yeah, no, I think you're right, Joe. I think Blood Angels do definitely have some options there, but also I think other things that could potentially work in that space is definitely going to be stuff like Nurgle again. I mean, Nurgle, I think we're going to see a lot of Nurgle come back, because we haven't said this much, but Narrow the Search has gone away, and now that Narrow the Search has gone away, there's nothing that stops you from having an invuln, and not having an invuln means that Nurgle are all of a sudden again very, very strong again, because you can manipulate where the objectives go. They've got loads of really great mid-tier support characters that can hide within hordes and hordes of Nurglings and plague bearers and all the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, crikey, if someone had a great unclean one sat on one of these surrounded by plague bearers, you're gonna struggle to get him off it.
Yeah.
So,
or even a Morty, he'd be a struggle to move.
Well, indeed. Although you're probably not going to leave Morty in the middle, are you? But I mean,
he's going to be busy. You do a tag team. You just have Morty running around your opponent's lines, causing havoc.
Mm. But no, I think Nurgle again. They've got a time to shine with this. I think we could go back to lots and lots of Nurgle conga lines.
Yeah. Even Custodes could do well out of this. Like with their banner guys, with the -1 to be hit. God, if those objectives are in or on cover, you ain't getting a unit of Custodes with a character out.
No, that's true. Also, as well though, Phil's Supreme Command detachment of tank commanders could be quite good in this situation.
Well, I didn't think about tank commanders. Yeah, because
you think?
Well, yeah, because you're going to want to be in the mid-table with the majority of your short-range fire with all your
if you take
Gatling
your
cannons
demolisher
and
cannons,
things.
yeah.
So, you could just, the way to do it with the tank commanders as well is park all 3 of them within 3 of 1. So you're hedging your bets on one objective, but it does mean that you can, if you commit 3 characters to that, like, say, the middle one, they're not going to be easy to remove because they're tank commanders. So, they're toughness 8 with a 2-up armor save, isn't it, for the Leman Russ tank commander?
No, 3.
3, but it's toughness 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that is tough, man. That's difficult to get rid of. All you need is a tech priest sat behind him going, come on, stay healthy, and you'll be fine. It's the way forwards, man. Get yourself. Well, you've got a tech priest. That's what you need,
I
mate.
do. I never find they're worth it though. Whenever I use it, because you're only healing. Was it D3 wounds a turn?
True. True.
Oh, what you need is a priest surrounded by 10 Bulgrin with a 2-up save and a 3-up invuln.
Yeah, that would be a lot better.
But as Phil has said on many occasions, he doesn't deal with Bulgrins. They're abhuman, and they are not to be trusted. But anyway, there you go. So that's Ascension. Interesting one. Definitely one to think about for next week. But yeah, interesting. Who wants to talk about Frontline Warfare? I imagine Joe should, seeing as he did the first one. Frontline Warfare, Joe, what's that all about?
Hang on, let me just not put my paintbrush down.
Oh yes, absolutely, because you are always consistently paying 100% attention to the cast.
I am. So, Frontline Warfare, the blurb. Frontline Warfare was originally featured in Chapter Approved 2017 edition. This mission rewards bold and aggressive tactics, allowing players to score more victory points for holding objective markers outside of their deployment zone, and even more if they risk pushing forward and to hold the objective in their opponent's deployment zone. In this mission, timing is key. Committing too much too early could leave you open to a late-game counterattack, with your opponent scoring more victory points from your now unaffected home objective.
Ooh. So what's all that about, mate? What's the deployment conditions?
Alright, players roll off, and the winner decides who will be the attacker defender.
Yeah, we know
the
all that.
defender determines which of the standard deployment maps is used, then selects one of the deployment zones for their army. The opponent uses the other one. Starting with the defender, players alternate placing objective markers until 4 have been set up. The first objective marker that each player sets up must be wholly within their own deployment zone and more than 6 inches away from the edge of the battlefield. The second objective marker that each player sets up must be more than 12 inches away from any other objective marker and 6 inches from the table edge, an equal distance from both players' deployment zones. They're going quite hard on these, like, dead center objective markers, aren't they?
Yeah,
It's
very
the
much
most
so.
balanced way of playing the game, though, if you think about it.
But these two, you've got the whole length of the deployment zone, haven't you? Or the center line, whereas it's not locked into a quarter or a half, unless you've got Pointy Dawn of War or Pointy Other One. The attacker deploys their entire army. The defender deploys their entire army.
Beautiful.
Right. Victory conditions. At the end of the game, the player with the most victory points wins.
Standard.
Right. Standards. Just do it the old Navy way. First one to die loses. Right.
Brilliant.
Right. Take and hold. The words in bold. At the end of each battle round, each player scores a number of victory points for each objective marker they control. A player scores 1 victory point if they control the objective marker in their own deployment zone, 4 victory points if they control the objective marker in their opponent's deployment zone, and 2 victory points for each objective marker they control. In the middle, a player controls the objective marker if they have more models within 3 inches of their opponent one.
There you go. So, essentially, again, get into your enemy's deployment zone and take their stuff.
Yeah.
Standard.
4 victory points is quite big.
I know, but it's almost pretty impossible to do. So I would, whenever I played this one in the previous version, I just always try and play it safer by going for the 2 in the middle and just making sure my one at the back in my deployment zone is perfectly safe.
You don't feel confident in your ability to go and grab?
We're trying to get their one in their deployment zone is almost impossible because 1, I play a guard army, 2, I have very little deep striking capability except a bunch of Death Riders. So no, I do not.
Well, you'd play the long game, Phil.
Yeah, I basically take it safe, try and get those 4 victory points a turn, which is more than enough to eke out a victory over 3 or 4 turns.
Well, you want to get 5 a turn, don't you, really? You want to hold the 2 in the middle.
Yeah, plus yours, yeah.
Seems like a totally reasonable strategy, though, to be fair. I mean, definitely seems like a way to do things. I personally would always try very hard to try and get that, that opponent's one. But definitely seizing control of the middle ground is massively important. In the GT finals that took place earlier, well, not earlier this year now, no, sorry, I've got to remember, it's 2020 now, isn't it? But yeah, back in early 2019 when I played in the GT finals, the only game I lost was the older version of this. What did that used to be called? It was
also something like Warfare, wasn't it?
No, I don't think it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Whatever it used to be called, and I was, outperforming my opponent in terms of like damage and all that kind of stuff. But I ended up losing the game because he managed to claim, control of the center objectives really, really early on, or the center objective really early on, and due to the way the terrain was laid out, I really struggled to get it off of him. But had I, actually taken the initiative and seized control of that middle ground early doors, I would have very comfortably won that. So I can speak from experience that, definitely you want to try and, you don't want to rely on just standing back and holding your one. You've really, really got to try and claim that middle ground and play for the make a play for your opponents where possible. That's for sure.
If you've got the kind of throwaway units that deal a lot of damage, like a Gene Stealer Cult player, or an Orc player, where you can just sling units into your opponent's deployment zone and just try and 1 or 2 turns in the game is all you need, just to kind of just toe in on that objective with a troops choice and take it off your opponent. Getting 4 points twice in the game is huge in this one.
Even just getting it once will normally be enough, because invariably what tends to happen is you each have your own one in your deployment zone, and then you each have one in the middle. So for most of the game, you tend to be pretty neck and neck, I find, and then it's down to the last turn or two where it kind of swings one way or another. And if you whittle them down enough where you can cheekily either grab that second middle one or even somehow get their one in their objective, their deployment zone, that's going to be pretty huge.
No, I totally agree. No, it's a good one, man. I mean, again, it's a pretty tactically interesting mission. It's it's not the most complex it could be, but it definitely delivers in terms of in terms of gameplay opportunities, and yeah, it's interesting. So, thumbs up there. Phil, do you want to tell us about the 4 pillars, the infamous 4 pillars?
I do. I have to say, this is probably my favourite mission from Chapter Approved 2018. So
my goodness, his favourite mission.
I think
Broadly
it is
considered one of the worst missions. He loves it.
Really? I love it. It's great.
It's only because people don't like it because they make some have to take troop choices for some mad reason.
I mean, imagine having an army that includes troop choices.
I know, madness.
Right, so this mission encourages players to ensure they hold more of the 4 equally spread objectives than their opponent at the end of each battle round. This is made easier if a player is also trying to destroy more units than their opponent each round, meaning the players can take a variety of approaches to how they score victory points. A key part of this mission is that only troops can control objectives. Players must make critical decisions when building their army and prioritising targets on the battlefield. So let's talk about the battlefield to start off with. So you place 4 objective markers as follows. Draw imaginary lines from the centre of the battlefield towards each corner of the battlefield and place an objective marker 15 inches from the centre of the battlefield along each of those lines. Once they've all been placed, the players then create the rest of the battlefield and set up terrain. So in this case, I presume it means all of your objectives are on the ground floor, because it also says ensuring no terrain features within 3 inches of an objective marker.
You are indeed correct. This is one of the ones where it is using the Chapter Approved 2018 stipulation that you can't place objective markers on top of things.
Because it's objectives first, then terrain. Deployment is as normal in terms of rolling off for attacker and defender. And then your victory points, there are two different ways of scoring victory points. So the first one is Siphon Power. At the end of each battle round, if one player controls more objective markers than their opponent, they score 1 victory point. If they control all 4 objective markers, they score 3 victory points. The player controls it if they have basically troops battlefield roll within 3 inches as normal. It says other units cannot control objective markers. Ignore them when determining for capturing objectives. And then the last one is no prisoners. At the end of each battle round, a player scores 1 victory point if more units than your opponent's army were destroyed during the battle round than from their own army.
Solid.
So, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You either need to control more objective markers and or defeat more, just kill more units. But I tend to find that's what you kind of want to be doing anyway, because you want to be, especially if you're going second, you want to be shooting your opponent off of their objectives, which not only stop them from scoring, but also you're gaining victory points for.
No, absolutely. I mean, sorry, Joe, you were going to say?
I was going to say, it's definitely a mission that you benefit from going second.
Oh, for sure.
But only a little bit you benefit from going second. Because then your opponent kind of controls the flow of the game, but it means that you can counter whatever they do. Because it means at the start of your turn, you get, okay, cool. They only killed 1 thing, so I only need to kill 2. But they are holding more objectives, so those 2 things I need to kill. I need to just bump off those objectives, and I get that. So you can really control like who gets the points.
And you almost need to be quite clever about how many units you kill a turn, because I've done it before at the last GT where I was sort of storming ahead on the kill points, but then because towards the end of the game he didn't have as many units to kill, and all the easy to kill stuff was already killed, already destroyed, it then meant he was creeping up on kill points a bit more towards the end. So it's like sometimes there's no point you killing 3 units turn 1 if he's only killed 1. But then obviously it makes sense to kill them just from the points efficiency of like, you need to kill stuff. But you don't want to kill too much where you can't, still keep winning that each turn. If that makes sense.
You're better off killing 2 units and then maiming like a third and
fourth. You need to try and ideally destroy stuff to the point where there's 1 or 2 models left and they are somehow still going to pass them around, or you just half the efficiency, half a unit rather than totally wipe it out.
I'm sorry, I muted myself. Let me start again there. That being said, though, I think, depending on the outcome and depending on how the game goes, you can obviously, if you're in a situation where you're really, flying ahead, you can just go for the kill more consistently. But, yeah, it's reasonable to assert that relying on troops to score objectives is a much less reliable strategy than consistently killing something every turn. But that being said, the 2 in conjunction obviously is the optimized way of achieving victory. But
you just need to prioritize killing your opponent's troops, basically. Until they're all dead, then you can kind of worry about everything else.
Yeah. But some armies benefit from this mission more than others, because I hated this mission at the qualifiers, because I only had 4 troops in my army, and they were Cabalite warriors, and they die super easy. And orcs, you kind of think do really well on this, but if they come up against a very shooty army, their infantry just falls to pieces. This is a mission where Space Marines are gonna kind of dominate on because of how resilient their infantry is, and also custodes as well will do well on this.
I think the Elder always did quite well with it as well, though. Only because you could be quite crafty with where you put stuff and how you did things. The Rangers were always very strong troop options. So too are Scouts, though, I guess, from the Space Marine side of things. Another army that actually I think could do really well here, controversial, I know, Sisters of Battle. I think they could do pretty well.
Yeah, they're very hardy. and the fact that they can control, like when they die, they can shoot at you. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like I need to get them off here, but I don't really want to be taking damage in return.
Now, one of the things I'm seeing from Sisters in terms of what I've read about them and going through the codex and all the other stuff and looking at their rules, I actually think that Sisters, as an army, can very comfortably rely on their troop choices, putting in a lot of work for them. Because again, they're very cheap. And they're very versatile, and I think that's one of the things about Sisters that I think is going to really surprise people more and more and more, is that they're cheap enough that you can really spam out their units, but they're also pretty durable. I know they're only toughness 3, but free up armor save that once you whack it in cover, unless of course you're playing against Iron Warriors or Imperial Fists, grants you that 2-up save. Plus all the acts of faith and all the other things you can throw on them. I mean, you can very comfortably start to take large hordes of Sisters of Battle, which I'm sure Games Workshop will love, because, that's going to be something that will be very lucrative for them. But, you can very comfortably take 60 Sisters, models, troop models, so you could do double battalion and not even really break a sweat. I mean, that's not even... I mean, if it's standard out loadout, that's not even 700 points, I don't think. Or maybe I can't remember if it's 11 points a model or 10 points a model, but I think it's 11 points a model. But regardless, Sisters will do well here. I'm looking forward to seeing Sisters making their return. I mean, I'm interested to see if anyone is going to be running them in any meaningful sense at the GT finals. That's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, the people that'll be running them will be the ones that have already had the army in the past.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that they're going to be spamming the troops, because they're very expensive, or at least they were.
They're probably more expensive now getting them on the second-hand market than they were from ever buying from GW.
Well, no, indeed, but obviously, it won't be too long until the standard Sister stuff. I imagine by the end of February, all the Sister stuff will be available to buy.
Yeah.
Would be my assumption. But yeah, no, that's cool, man. 4 Pillars, I mean, again, I never really understood why people didn't like it. I actually thought, in a way, it was really funny that a lot of, the ITC guys would complain, but this is probably the closest to ITC you get. The only problem is there's a very specific stipulation around what controls objectives. But the kill more, hold more philosophy is very much alive and well here. The only thing is, obviously, it doesn't have all the nice, optional secondaries and other things that they like, but... it always sort of surprised me that the competitive scene didn't take to this more strongly. But yeah, I like 4 Pillars. I think it makes you think. I think it makes you have to take a balanced, interesting army, and it definitely rewards people who, have a bit more tactical nuance to what they're trying to do, which is always good. So the last of the missions, and the one that I will speak about, is Lockdown. So Lockdown is a brand new mission. Ooh, very exciting. Not featured in any previous publication. Ooh. Players allocate numbers to each objective marker, almost like in Maelstrom. Although you don't do it that way in Maelstrom. But anyway, let's continue on. Knowing that each battle round, the marker with the corresponding number will disappear. Ooh. Players can therefore plan their strategy, knowing which objective markers will be removed. Remember that objective markers are removed to a minimum of 2, therefore choose wisely, crikey, words, which objective marker you wish to number 1 or 6, as those objective markers will be present for the entire game. Now, me and Joe actually played this game, didn't we, the other day, Joe?
Yes, and I like this mission, and I hate it at the same time.
Well, indeed.
Because when me and you played, I ended up with objectives 1, 2, and 3. So, by the end of turn 3, I only had 1 left, and you were still sitting pretty on 4, 5, and 6.
Indeed, but I still lost because, Imperial Fists, innit?
Yeah.
But anyway, the way it works, in case you were curious, the players roll off, the winner decides, attacker, defender, the score, and then the attacker deploys their entire army, and that's how it goes. In terms of the battlefield, The players roll off, starting with the winner. You alternate placing objective markers until 6 have been set up. Each objective marker must be set up anywhere on the battlefield, more than 12 away from any other objective marker, but more than 6 from an edge of the battlefield. Now here's where all the weird lockdown stuff comes into effect. So, essentially, at the start of the first battle round, but before the first turn begins, the players taking the first turn selects one objective marker to be objective marker 1. The player taking the second turn then selects one objective marker to be objective marker 6. The players taking the first turn then selects one objective marker that has not been numbered and rolls a d6, re-rolling if the result corresponds to an objective that is already numbered. That objective marker is numbered in the corresponding result. The player going second does the same. Both players repeat this process until all 6 objective markers have an individual number. Which, again, Joe, was pretty tedious, wasn't it? Because we started getting into that situation where we only had 2 numbers left to resolve, and we seemed to only be able to roll the numbers that had come before.
Yeah, so in the end we were like, on a 1, 2, or 3, that one is objective
3.
5.
Yeah.
And that one, and then on a 4, 5, and 6, that one is objective 2. And it's just like... But
it's a little bit weird because obviously in the little blurb it says you've got to like plan your strategy about which stuff's going to disappear. So I'm surprised there wasn't more tactical nuance in terms of when you're deploying or allocating the numbers. You don't get some control over which they are.
Well, you get control over the first one and
the last one.
The last one, but yeah,
2 that don't disappear.
But what's interesting is it depends how you look at this, right? So when I played against Joe, I thought, you know what, I'm going to roll for one that Joe is sitting on because I have a higher chance, bizarrely in my mind, of rolling 2 or a 3. Well, again, 2, 3, 4 is still good, whereas 5 would have been bad. So I was thinking I've got more odds of having something that will corrode or fade away before the game ends if I roll for one of Joe's first, rather than rolling for one of my own. Because what that meant was I felt like there was probably more of a chance that I was going to get a 2 or a 3 or a 4, which there is more of a chance of. Because 2, 3, 4 are the worst results. Obviously 4 is better than 3 and 2, but 5 is the best one that you want to roll for. So you want to try and create a situation where you can kind of where you could potentially play the odds, so to speak. But again, it's dice; you can never control the outcome. But as it happened, the first one I rolled in Joe's deployment zone was a 2, and I was like, "There you go, Joe. That's going to muck you around." And then I think Joe then, in response, was like, "Well, I'm going to roll in my deployment zone as well," and then rolled a 3, and it was like, "Oh, that's not really gone to plan." And then the other 2 obviously ended up being 4 and 5, and they were much more sort of towards the middle or in my deployment zone, which was quite fortuitous. But so I don't know. I mean, you are right. It is weird that there's not a way to kind of weight it more or add that tactical nuance. But you get to basically you get to choose what objective 1 and objective 6 is, and that's it. I guess you could potentially choose to make objective 1 something like the one in the middle, or you could make it one in your opponent's deployment zone to really mess around with things and kind of give a statement of intent in terms of where your army's going. But yeah, I don't know. Is it
worth? I was going to say reading out 2 different victory conditions.
Oh yes, of course. So, target secured. Each player scores 1 victory point at the end of each of their turns for each objective marker they control. A player controls an objective marker as per the usual way within 3 of the objective marker. And dominance. At the end of each battle round, a player scores 1 victory point if they control more objective markers than their opponent. A player controls an objective marker, as we already stated. So yeah, so there's 2 victory conditions in this. You get 1 for each objective you control. And
at
you
the end
get
of your turn.
1 for controlling more, which is quite cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you score them at different times as well. So one's at the end of your turn,
yeah,
and then the other one's at the end of the battle round.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a certain amount of additional bookkeeping, that's for sure. But again, it's good. I mean, it's you know, I mean, as a mission, I think the thing is with the Eternal War missions and what Games Workshop have tried to achieve with their rule set as it concerns matched play is rules and scenarios that create more balanced armies, more interesting armies, and more kind of tactical gameplay. You know, I'm not going to go into another rant where I talk about, you know, other types of competitive 40k and all the rest of it, but, you know, I do like Eternal because of the fact that it rewards movement and it rewards actual, you know, risk versus reward. It's not just dialed in and playing to your army's built-in advantages. You really actually have to think, right, in order to achieve success, I need to make decisions rather than just going, my army is good at this, I have weighted the deck in my favour, and this is what I'm going to do. And again, you know, I mean, yeah, that is what that is. But I think that's the thing with this stuff is like, you know, it's not, is it perfect? No, I'm surprised they've gone back to facilitating missions where you can place objective markers any way you want, but that's not every mission. And I think actually what they've done now is made some interesting variety, and I think that's important for, you know, competitive 40k is to have the missions mean something, not just turning up and playing, you know, 5 or 6 identical games with the identical stipulations and, you know, with the same kind of strategy running throughout. I think this, you know, the way you play this and the way this works is going to be different every time, and you are given a bit of tactical nuance in how you approach things with your opponents and stuff. But yeah, I think, you know, on the basic sense, I quite like it that they've added in that variety. I mean, what do you think, Phil? What's your opinion of Eternal?
I mean, it's the missions that we played the most. I think Maelstrom's a bit more quirky and fun, if that makes sense. But I do like Eternal. I like the new ones overall seem pretty good. I've not played any of them, or in this new format anyway. Mm-hmm. The last one seems a bit out there in comparison to the others, and it sort of feels like the other 5 they've really tried to like refine and hone from their years of previous Eternal War missions to try and come up with some great new ones. And then they've got this one that's a bit of a joker in the deck that's like untested, and it's like, here you go. So rather than having 6 that are all really nice, balanced and well rounded, they've got 5 that are potentially like that, and then one that's completely random.
I think that's good though, because when you go into an event, you're like, my list is perfect for this tournament, and because it just does this one thing really, really well. And then someone goes, well, like, what about lockdown? What's your plan for that? And it's like, well, it's a 1 in 6 chance it'll turn up. He's like, yeah, but what if it does turn up? You could lose a tournament because your army is not prepared to deal with this.
I don't know if lockdowns are that swingy. I mean, it's not like the previous missions where there's a big no invuln bubble, for example, or only fly can score objectives. So, and I was a big fan of the last year's objectives. I think this one is there's just that nuance of you potentially need to have the ability to go and grab objectives in your opponent's deployment zone because you might not have any in yours, bar one.
I think for me, the thing I quite like about this set of Eternal is that they haven't done anything in here to punish people. And I think Eternal 2018 was them trying to address some very real situations that we had within the meta, as it were. And, you know, there was an overabundance of very specific type of armies performing very strongly. And I think the game has sort of moved on enough now, and that the armies have got enough interesting new things that there's plenty out there that can combat some of the weird elements of things like the Nurgle Plague Bearer spamming and that kind of stuff. So I'm not too concerned about returning to all that sort of thing, but I think it's good that they're not punishing people, because people did I think that annoyed a lot of people was like, well, I play Imperial Knights, and you've created a mission where my Imperial Knights are going to get messed up because I'm going to lose a vital part of my, in my Imperial Knight armory, and that's my invuln. Taking that away from Imperial Knights was a big problem, and a lot of people, I think, were really annoyed about that. So not punishing people is definitely a smart move. And then beyond that, I think it's good to have a variety and to try and sort of build something a bit more refined that they have done now. So yeah, the only nuance with the whole thing is being sure to, again, for the first few months, to consistently read and check the interpretations, or not interpretations, but check the missions with your opponents early doors, because there's not very much standardization between each of them. So consistently kind of being sure that you remember whether it's at the start of the player turn, at the end of the battle round, at the start of the battle round, at the end of the player turn, whatever it happens to be. You just got to make sure that you're all over that, because that will make a big difference to how you approach things. And I think, again, knowing these missions in more detail is going to always help you have a competitive edge over your opponent. And I do think not very many people in the real kind of competitive space are too bothered about Eternal War. And as such, you can tend to find that if you do find yourself coming up against a very, very strong player who plays in ITC format more frequently, you'll probably find that with just some little bits of tactical thinking and knowing these missions more in depth, you'll be able to claw out wins against stronger players, because they themselves don't spend too much time worrying about this. Although obviously the best players know everything and know all the variables, and there's not really going to be much of a chance you can do much of anything about those. But, who can say? I think it's good overall, is where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. That has been our appreciation and or opinions on Eternal War 2019. We look forward to playing all 6 of these missions at the Grand Tournament Finals. Should you be there, come along and say hello. We'd always like to chat to people, because, we like the validation and or, communication that we get from you, our listeners. But, yeah.
But, as an addendum, if you come over to us and we are playing a game, don't be upset if we don't talk to you immediately.
Did you have one of those once, Joe? Is that what you're saying?
I had someone come over to me at the last tournament, and then and they were like, hey, and I was talking to them, but it was literally the last game of the tournament, and I was like, I need to win this one. I don't have time to talk to someone. So I was like, hi, how are you doing? I need to concentrate on this.
There
and they kind of looked at me a little bit put off, but.
Well, if you are that person that looked at Joe,
I am sorry,
or
I didn't mean
that Joe was being mean, you're absolutely justified. I mean, what a horrible thing for him to do.
Yeah, I was in the zone, and I didn't want to lose my battle focus, as it were. I didn't want to lose my edge.
That's it. This means more than anything to Joe. You need to remember that.
Yeah, I need to win. Otherwise, I go home and I just sit in the shower as it rains on me in my clothes. I just sob gently.
Joe's going for the top 10, isn't that right, Joe?
Yeah, if I can make top 10, I'll be super chuffed.
Boom. There you go. Said.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. Phil, any last little thoughts or feelings from you before I transition out of here?
I'm looking forward to playing them. Obviously, playing them for the first time at GT Final will not be ideal, but I'll just have to give it my best chance.
Absolutely. And we know you will, Phil. You'll do us proud, as will we all. And now, let's transition. Transitional noise. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. In this part of the podcast, we're going to be talking about the Warhammer community post that went out on Christmas Day. Warhammer community's Christmas gift to all of us, the loyal Warhammer and or Warhammer 40,000 fans. Not that there is just a generic Warhammer anymore. Obviously, Warhammer Age. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm joined, as ever, by good old Phil. How's it going, Phil?
Still as good as when you asked me 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, but Phil, you see, this is the third segment of the podcast. No one necessarily knows the order we do these things in. You're supposed to, give a sort of air of mystery to the whole thing. Much like,
yes. It's been,
much like how Joe will, because you never know. I mean, like, you may not have... Anyway, Joe, how are you?
Super duper.
There you go. Look, see, Joe gets it, Phil. Why can't you be more like Joe?
Yeah.
Just because I'm
Grow
not.
a better beard.
How dare you? How very dare you?
How dare you, sir? So it's Christmas morning. You've woken up. You've done your, annual Christmas traditions. I don't know necessarily what yours are, but, for me, it will have been, wake up around 11, wander downstairs, go to the Christmas tree where some sort of gift has been left lying around, and then wait for the rest of the day till we get around to doing this mad Secret Santa ceremony that me and my brothers do, and sister. And it's a whole wonderful event. I won't bore you with the details because you don't care. But in the midst of all of that, Games Workshop, told us in advance that they were going to be making some exciting reveals on Christmas Day. So, I mean, Joe had some lofty expectations for what he was going to see. I mean, Joe, what were you hoping to see on Christmas morning?
I was hoping to see a new Lionel Johnson.
Ooh.
But what I received was crippling disappointment.
Well, I think your problem is you weren't just hoping for it. You were pretty much 100% convinced, for whatever reason, that it was going to happen.
I was told by the voices on the wind, and they lied to me.
The winds of magic, they whispered to you in your sleep.
Yeah. I think it's more to do with sleep deprivation. My daughter was incredibly ill over the Christmas period, and she was basically up like all night for about 3 days. I think I'd just gone mad by then. And
the only way that you could maintain your sanity was to create, mad fantasies about the Lionel Johnson release.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, they teased the new Psychic Awakening book being Dark Angels, and then a few days before when they said there was going to be a Christmas Day release, if you looked carefully at the wrapping paper they'd used, it had the Dark Angel sword symbol. So obviously they were giving you a hint that it was something Dark Angel specific.
Right. What we got, much like when do you remember when the Mechanicum came out, and they were like, you're going to get a much beloved character from the past. And what we got was a character we've never even blooming heard of. And that's what they've done now. It's like, you might remember this guy from that 3-word sentence that was squirreled away in the Dark Angels Codex 27 years ago. Had you have been alive at the time, you would have read it. And you would have remembered it to this day, and this is him now, but not as he was then, because he is now a Primaris Marine.
Which I truly hate, by the way. I know, obviously, I've had my moments of critiquing the Primaris decision, and I understand there's multiple narrative things that they've created specifically to facilitate Primaris, the death of Baal, the whole kind of Dark Imperium, big old rift thing, and all the fun that comes along with that, and the whole everything that happened in the event that was not the End Times, but I've forgotten what it's called. The Rising Storm. Was it the Rising Storm?
Gathering Storm.
Yeah, there you go.
Gathering
Storm, thank you. Yes, of course. But yes, so, I mean, the thing is with this is, like, from the outset, I was curious whether or not the Primaris idea was going to be that interesting, because from the outset it was obvious to all of us who have any amount of kind of awareness of what GW are obviously trying to achieve with Primaris Marines, which is that they're obviously just a new range of Space Marines that are true scale, because everyone complained that Space Marines were a little bit too dinky and a little bit too stupid looking, especially when there were guardsman models that were of a similar size and scale, and, we were getting to a place where they were clearly looking to upscale the game, and Primaris Marines are the symptom of that, is that, they've always wanted to kind of, do a new range of Marine models, and they'd sort of painted themselves into a corner, and they kind of, in my opinion, they probably had loads of options, but the two options that were quite clear was just say that this is a new type of armor, and as a result, the models are more in line with what you would commonly call true scale, but they're still just Space Marines, they're just wearing new armor. Or we come up with this new mad storyline where it's a bunch of super soldier extra special Space Marines, and we're just going to inject that into the lore, the literature, and everything about the 41st millennia, and just work on the assertion that it's fine because Gilliman said so. And that to me has always been the most painful thing about Primaris, because it's quite clear what they were trying to do with it from a business perspective, and how they've kind of shoehorned it into the lore is a little bit kind of haphazard. And where I kind of gave it credit was where like Black Library and other people stepped in and started exploring interesting lore and ideas around how Space Marines interacted with Primaris Space Marines. But all of that now seems to have been completely washed away by the release schedule, because Dark Angels were famously, at least in the Black Library sense, one of the chapters that really wasn't into the idea of Primaris Marines being indoctrinated into their inner workings, into their inner circle, as it's called. And this guy is the first Primaris Marine that is allowed into the inner circle, and the fact that they even state that on this community post really kind of, it cuts me a bit, because actually it illustrates that all of the interesting, fun, exciting, nuanced kind of civil war and interesting stuff that you thought could be happening with Primaris Marines is now not happening with Primaris Marines. It's like, look, get over it. This is just new Space Marines now, and we're almost at a point where we can just discontinue the old range, and we will do eventually. We're phasing out little bit by little bit, but yeah, this, I don't know, it just sort of, a bit of the magic has ebbed away with this guy, because it's like, oh, okay, cool, now even Dark Angels love Primaris Marines.
But I think it's giving you the option, if you are a Dark Angel player and you do like Primaris, that you can have a Primaris army led by a Primaris captain. I mean, I get your point about how there was some nuance in terms of them distrusting Primaris and not really letting them reach the sort of the higher ranks. But at the same time, you do need to give those people the choice to play it a different way than how you want to play it. So in your world, you could still be like, oh, I'm not having... Because you collect Dark Angels, you could still keep all of your Dark Angels as non-Primaris if you want, and play it how you want to. But then this is giving other people a different way of playing it, basically.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I've got no issue with people wanting to run a Primaris Dark Angel army. That's not the thing. It's just the fact that it's now written into the lore that the Dark Angels themselves have into the canon of the 41st millennia, the 40k universe. Dark Angels are now cool with certain Primaris Marines. Not all, but some. And that frustrates me, because, okay, yeah, sure, before it was always a case of, well, we've got to say that we want these Primaris Marines, because otherwise Gilliman will come sniffing around and he'll find out that, you know, there's a loopy bugger hiding in a stasis field somewhere in our, you know, darkest crypts, and all this other kind of mad stuff that they're trying to keep secret. And I kind of understood that at first, which is we have them because we have to have them, but we don't trust them. Whereas this takes it that extra step where it's like, no, we have them because they're cool now, and we're cool with it. And it's just, as I say, what I liked about Primaris as an idea early doors was that it offered a number of creative opportunities where you could create an interesting division between the Space Marines of old and the new Primaris Marines. And I felt like some of the Black Library novels really started to toy around with that idea, but it seems to, things like this just tell me that it's just, they're not interested in that. All Primaris Marines is the new range of Space Marines. Forget about it. It won't be too long until this all just becomes Space Marines, and again, that's fine if that's what they want to do. It just sort of weirds me out in a way, because I think it kind of damages the history and the heritage of Space Marines as a piece of lore within 40k. It just makes them less interesting, because Primaris Marines are inherently boring versus because they don't have any of that history that Space Marines do. I mean, obviously some do, because some just get magically turned into Primaris Marines because whatever, it's sci-fi in it or fantasy, we can do that. But I don't know. It just starts to feel really lazy. I don't know. I'm just sort of. I know I'm venting here. I mean, Joe, what's your opinion on all this? You're not much of a lore person. Neither am I, really, I suppose. But what do you think?
I'm a big fan of lore. I love the books. I love the history and stuff. I think the Primaris are good for it and bad for it. They're both because like their background story is a bit ropey in how they got introduced. In terms of they're here now. They've been hidden for 10,000 years on a planet which you knew was there but didn't really care about, and now we've got enough Space Marines to rebuild 30, 40 chapters. It was a bit blur, but they've kind of retroactively gone back and kind of written the story in and filled gaps and stuff. So it's getting better. The models look incredible. Amazing. I think what they should have done is just said, we're redesigning Space Marines. And just being honest. Not a case of, not like, gone like, oh, this is a new type of armor, blah, blah, blah. They've gone, we're redesigning Space Marines. This is what they're going to look like now.
I think if they did the new armor route, though, at least they could have said, look, when they're in this suit of armor, it's so crazy advanced and cool, they become the equivalent of what we know a Primaris Marine to be. But if you're using the old types of squads, then yeah, sure. But their armor isn't as advanced, so they only get 1 wound, and their bolters aren't as good, so they don't get AP -1, and so on and so forth. So you could have still come to the same resolution. You just could have said, yeah.
If you look at the old RTB01 Marines next to the last, like the old the current tactical squad, there is a sizable difference between them. Like a huge difference, almost like that of a Space Marine to a Primaris Marine. It's not something they haven't done before.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and if they wanted to change it, they can, because at the end of the day, it's Games Workshop, and they are the rules writers and the takers of our money, and we'd do it anyway. We'd be angry, we'd be annoyed, and people would be like, "Oh, I'm not going to do this game anymore." And they'll go away for a year or two, and then they come back and be like, "Oh, these new models are awesome."
Yeah, I mean,
again,
absolutely to your point, the new Primaris range is a gorgeous range of miniatures. You know, and I'm not inherently against a redesign of Space Marines. I think it's essential because I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, Space Marines were a very dated range. You know, a great range, but very dated. And there are some newer additions, but I think the biggest problem that Space Marines had of old was the scale, because, you know, the only way they started becoming more and more baroque and more mad, and they kept putting more and more stuff on these miniatures, but it all got very bunched up and very kind of, you know, the kind of taller, sleeker design of a Primaris Marine makes, you know, suits the heroic stature and appearance that you would imagine Space Marines would have. So,
well, they were heading in the right direction with the Death Watch, because those got scaled up massively. Those guys were huge.
Yeah, from what I gather, I got the impression they were aware of the Primaris Marines coming, so sort of wanted to bridge the gap a bit with that range, because they were basically the last of the old school Marines, even though they were mostly Mark 8. Which is kind of unheard of even then, in terms of the miniature range.
Yeah, indeed. And the funny thing is about that, though, isn't it? It's like, you know, they talk a lot about like Mark 9 armor and, you know, what happened to Mark 9 armor and this, that, and the other. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, no, we can still go back and explore that in the future. It's like, you're not going to go back and start doing old style Marines. I mean, unless they are. I mean, we don't know what the rest of 2020 has in store. Maybe they will do something interesting with old school Marines. Maybe they will revisit, and create a more kind of interesting Civil War angle between Space Marines and Primaris Space Marines, because that's what I really wanted to see, and that's what I always felt was really interesting about Primaris Marines as a narrative, is you could take it in a really interesting direction. It's just that they haven't. They've just sort of gone, no, everyone loves Primaris Marines, and they're everywhere now, so just get used to them. They are what they are. And why are the Chaos Space Marines bigger? Oh, they just are. Don't worry about them. They just got bigger. It's like, okay.
Well, because of the warp.
Yeah, the warp. The good old warp. I mean, I only recently saw a size comparison between an old Chaos Space Marine multi-part miniature and the new Chaos Space Marine miniatures. And that is the same kind of comparison as a Primaris Marine to an old-style Space Marine. But no one had to come up with a reason for that. They just went, oh yeah, that's our new upscaled Chaos Space Marine range. It's like, okay.
Yeah. If you look at the size of the Havocs in comparison, those guys are huge.
Yeah.
From a Terminator basis, for Christ's sake.
Even the standard Marines they make, the standard Marines, Chaos Space Marines now are probably 1/4 bigger, which is a similar kind of comparison. They stand pretty much height wise in the scale of the game. They're very similarly scaled to Primaris Marines now. So
But what's interesting is with the Chaos, it's like they haven't changed aesthetic or the unit types. Like they've literally just updated the models. Whereas with Primaris, they've deliberately gone sort of out their way to create a different type of Space Marine, because these aren't just true scale tactical Marines. It's like instead you've got intercessors, Hellblasters, etc. They've deliberately designed to be different.
More people have got a Space Marine army though than Chaos Space Marine armies out there. So I guess more people would be put out with the change than there are Chaos players, kind of thing. I think Chaos players are just happy to get new models. And like the Thousand Suns, when they were made, the new Thousand Suns, they already knew that Primaris Marines were coming, so they were deliberately upscaled anyway. So Chaos players had already had that mental bridge implanted when the new models came out for them.
Yeah. But there you go. I mean, as a miniature goes, the new master, member of the Inner Circle, Primaris Dark Angel master is totally fine. I mean, he's a really nice looking model. Again, it's weird because it sort of he echoes so many elements of Azrael, the chapter master of the Dark Angels, because he's got the helmet and the sword, and okay, fair enough, he hasn't got a combi plasma, but this miniature has so many kind of cues, so many kind of visual references to Azrael. It's quite evident, but obviously he's not Azrael. He's some sort of new fella, which is fine. I mean, again, they did a couple of these for the Space Marine release. They got that new Salamanders guy that sort of looked like Vulcan Heston, but wasn't. And then they obviously had that Imperial Fist guy who was nothing like anybody, but had a power fist with knuckle dusters on it, which was quite hilarious. But I mean, I like the miniature. Again, the frustrating thing for me was the fact that it's sort of it shows me, at least I believe it shows me, that the Primaris range now is kind of settled in, and they've kind of now are doing away with the pretense, and it's sort of like, look, it's just new Space Marine, guys. Don't worry about it.
Everything that's been released now does the exact same thing as what an old school Space Marine thing does, but better. And therefore, those old things aren't being bought anymore.
Yeah.
So they're naturally phasing stuff out, because you go, oh, these new infiltrators are really cool models. I'll buy them. Oh, they're actually really good in the game. I won't use scouts anymore because these do that job, but 100 times better.
Yeah.
But at least I have the option to do it. And then in 2 years' time, you realise that you've not actually used those scout models at all.
You say that, but what was probably the most bought Space Marine model of the last year?
Last year would have been the Centurion.
Exactly, and that's an old school Space Marine.
Wow, I mean, it was one of the last Space Marine models released in, well, it was early 7th edition, so it's not even 5 years old, that model.
The problem with the Centurion is that I don't think they realised how good they'd made it.
No, probably not.
And because they've got aggressors now, they'll never go back to those Centurion fellas. That would be madness. Oh, hang on, we've actually made them broken.
Well, the whole point of that new Space Marine Codex was very much to make old school Marines much more viable and playable.
Yeah.
It wasn't to make Primaris Marines any better than they already were. I mean, obviously...
I call BS on that, my friend. They gave everything to Primaris and everything else.
Everything got updated, but regular Marines got a lot better as well.
No, they didn't. I mean, they got a lot better because they were utterly awful. But if you go through the stratagems, show me, other than Combat Squad, which, okay, actually everyone gets, so that doesn't even apply, there is not a single stratagem in there that applies to a tactical Marine. Like, nothing. It's literally nothing, other than, like, you know, the stuff that all Space Marines get. But, like, you know, intercessors have very specific rules. And you know, I think that's the thing. They prioritise the new poster child all day long, and it won't surprise me when 9th edition comes around, probably this year, where they just go, yeah, done. Now it's all Primaris Marines, you know, because I just can't see them not doing it at some point. I mean, maybe not 9th edition, but we're only 3 or 4 years away from the old Space Marine range going into the Hall of Fame, as we call it in the world of Hearthstone. But yeah, or Legends, I guess, as we call it in Warhammer 40,000.
That will probably just disappear into Legends.
Yeah, I think so. I think that'll be the way it goes pretty quickly. So yeah, look, I mean, in terms of the releases for 40k stuff, we got that, and we also got that reveal, and we also got told that there is the new Psychic Awakening Ritual of the Damned, which comes with rules for Dark Angels, Grey Knights, and Thousand Suns, which is super exciting. So we may well see Grey Knights, you know, getting a good series of improvements. I mean, you know, Joe, are you optimistic about the Grey Knights?
I am, actually. I think Grey Knights have wallowed in the bottom leagues for a long time now. Mainly because they haven't got many good stratagems, and the ones that they have got are too expensive to play reliably. Mm-hmm. So if they just reprice all the stratagems to one CP, that's fine, and then give them combat doctrines, so their bolters actually become -1 AP, is brilliant. And they're, because the army, they've got some solid units in that army. Rules-wise, that they are brilliant. They're just too expensive to put down on the table. And with a few tweaks, they could become amazing. Like, that whole army can deep strike with storm bolters, kind of thing. Everyone in that army is a psyker. Like, you, the big Nemesis Dread Knights are terrifying, kind of thing. But yeah, I think it'll be good. That's what all I can say, really.
There you go. You ran out of things to say, but yeah,
I think over that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Grey Knights, I think, will probably be good. I mean, Phil, you interested in Grey Knights? Are those one of those ones that you've secretly, you know, had a love for in the background? Have you ever fantasized about owning a Grey Knights army?
Well, I have indeed. I picked up the codex for it at the end of 7th edition because I was tempted to get them as an army. So I picked it up then, had a read through, but then never quite got around to buying it. And in fact, I've got some old, I believe, 2nd edition Grey Knight Terminators hanging around somewhere. So I've always been a fan of the old Grey Knights. And obviously they tie in with Inquisition as well, which I've always had a bit of a soft spot for. So it'd be good to see what they do with them. I mean, do you think there'd be any new models for them, even if it's like just a new miniature, a new special character?
I guess we'll find out this weekend, won't we? Because they're also doing the New Year's Open Day at Warhammer World on the 3rd. No, not the 3rd. Yeah, no, the 3rd. Yeah, so on Saturday the 3rd. Saturday the 4th. Sorry. They're going to be doing an open day, so maybe they'll reveal some new Grey Knight miniatures.
Quite lucky. Yeah, they're quite lucky because most of their line is already plastic. You've literally got, is it Drago and who's the other one? The guy with the demon sword.
Mm.
Both of those are fine cast, but I think everything else is plastic.
Technically, the only other stuff they've got that's fine cast is the Tech Marine and the Chaplain.
Yeah. So all they need is.
And Castellan Crow as well.
Yeah, Castellan Crow is the guy with the sword.
Yes, yeah.
So all that they need is those two characters. They're their own two characters to be released in plastic, and they'll be fine.
Mm.
And the other guys will probably get released at some point anyway.
Yeah, I think if they got a new Grey Knight's brother captain model, I think if they got a new generic Grey, but again, even that's available in the Paladins box set technically. So yeah, I mean, again, getting some new characters, but they got that. What was his name? Grandmaster something or other.
Voldus, whatever his name is. Is it Voldus?
Yeah, Voldus, I think it was the one who came in the Triumvirate of the Imperium.
Yeah.
He's pretty solid. So yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, Grey Knights are exciting to see, and obviously Thousand Sons as well. I mean, we've already seen the Thousand Sons have had humongous price drops in Chapter Approved 2019. So throw in a load of extra rules. I mean, they're saying here that the Thousand Sons will be able to dedicate themselves to one of the 9 cults of the Legion, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, more customization and more options for your Thousand Sons is going to be pretty exciting.
Thousand Sons are brilliant. I was looking through their codex the other day, and there are legitimate ways to run armies, which is like literally just 3 demon princes and then squads of 20 marines, and then just flying those around the table willy nilly, because they've got taking the sorcerers. They've got a relic or a warlord trait, which is basically the Veil of Darkness, where you just remove that unit and that character and then just redeploy them for free. So you just go bloop, put them in front of someone, give that unit +1 save, and then give them prescience, and then just hose down all of your enemies.
Do you reckon, actually, as well, that guy that was revealed as part of the War in the Clouds box set for Age of Sigmar for the Zench, do you think he'll be available in 40k?
If he's a legit demon character, then yeah, he will do. Because they made Horticulus Slimux a Nurgle character. So,
well, he's a Zangor character more than anything, isn't he?
Yeah, but Zangors are still demons, though, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're still very much in 40k, so
yeah,
he might be a cool thing to see come across for sure. I mean, maybe there'll be rules for him in the.
I find his look a bit weird though, because he's a lot more on the human side than the Zangor side, isn't he?
Yeah, well, his legs are very, very Zangory or Zenchi. And again, if the hood was over his head, I don't think there would be any issue. But obviously, because he's got that sort of that Bushido-esque top knot thing going on, that sort of feudal Japan top knot thing going on. He definitely has a more human element to him. But he'd be interesting to see come across. But yeah, the only other things that were announced for 40k people is if you liked the old Dark Vengeance model range, which includes the Hell Brutes for the Chaos Space Marines, but also a rather nice librarian for your Dark Angel army, assuming that you're still wanting to run old school Dark Angel librarians. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll get some impressive stuff in the new book that makes him worthwhile. You can also get a last chance to buy for the original Cypher model, which is terrible when compared to the new one, but obviously for its time was pretty amazing. You can also get the old Asmodai model, and what is quite interesting as well is you can get Veteran Sergeant Narman. What do you have?
Nanam, I always said.
Naman. What?
Nanam.
Nanam.
Like,
Oh,
yeah.
there you go. But you can get him as well, which, again, I think I think there was a, not Dark Vengeance, what was it called? There was an old second edition Dark Angel box set that I think referenced him, and he was available for a time. So it's nice to see him, available to buy. Although, again, very dated old model with a loadout that you probably wouldn't overly want to put on a Scout Sergeant anytime soon. But, I mean, it's interesting that they're giving you a chance to buy him. And also, you can get a Dark Angels web exclusive medallion. Ooh, baby. Sign me up.
Yeah.
So,
it's really sad, but
oh, sorry, Joe.
are you gonna do them though? Because you are a Dark Angels player.
I have been known to be a Dark Angels player. I've drifted in and out of the army over the last decade, I suppose. So towards the early part of the last 10 years, I was very heavily playing Dark Angels. And as the years have rolled on, probably less so. I started out 8th edition, aspiring to do Dark Angels again, and bought a lot of stuff to bolster my ranks. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll wait and see. I always like to keep the options open. I own a lot of Dark Angels models. I've got a lot of Deathwing and a lot of Ravenwing. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think I'm interested to see what they do. Just giving them doctrines is going to be a big buff, but it's going to be interesting to see what their specialised doctrine will be.
They're one of the few armies that actually makes Hellblasters good.
Well, indeed, and if they actually add a bunch of new strats to make Hellblasters even better, I think that's going to be super exciting.
Because they've got that stratagem that gives you +1 damage to a unit's plasma weapons, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you can make them damage free if you overcharge, or just damage 2 standard, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So there you go.
There could be a good anti-marine army then.
Could be. Could be.
Yeah.
It depends, because at the minute their chapter tactic is that only one of them will ever flee from a morale test, which is pretty strong for taking big units. And if they don't move, they reroll ones to hit with all weapons. So that's also quite good, because then with bolter drill, or bolter discipline, was actually quite solid, because obviously you could be firing your shots, 2 shots at 30 inches, re-rolling ones, but it just made the army very static, which I never entirely felt like kind of fit the idea of what the Dark Angels are trying to be, because they're much more of a strike force. They're much more kind of tactical and vanguardy in their ways. If you look at the mainstay units of Dark Angels, they're on bikes and they're Terminators. And bikes don't really want to stay stationary all that much, and Terminators don't want to stay stationary all that much. It's all about shock assault. So it was weird to me that they gave them a chapter tactic that essentially forced them to be very, very static. But what can you do?
Dark Angels was my first army when I started collecting Warhammer many moons ago. So I am tempted to pick up this guy and the lieutenant just to paint them and paint a green army just to see or just some green models would be nice.
The lieutenant is also a really beautiful model. I imagine the two side by side will look pretty damn cool, so that is good. But overall, gents, what do we think? Again, we said it from the outset. It was our Christmas day. We were all so excited. There was a lot of chatter in the group about maybe they'll reveal something else later, but they didn't. I mean, was this what you expected? Were you happy with this? What's the feelings?
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed because it's Christmas Day, for God's sake. Like, it's the biggest day of the year besides my birthday. It's the biggest day of the year, and they release what is essentially a normal Saturday or coming next week on a Sunday kind of post, which they've done all year. Like, there was no, like, grand release. There's nothing in there that was Christmas Day worthy. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed, but like knowing that those three armies are going to get a bit of a bump and a bit of a boost would be quite interesting. The whole thing about them bringing back Dark Vengeance blows my mind. It's just a case of like, why? Just why?
Because some people might want it.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be fans of the old model range to either complete a collection or just like the nostalgia of those models. I think what's interesting is Dark Vengeance probably isn't that old a range to bring back.
It came out in 2013, 2012, I want to say, Dark Vengeance.
It came out in 6th edition, but instead of releasing a new box set for 7th edition, all they did was change the bloody rulebook in the box and the box art.
No, that's it, yeah, because I remember it from the end of 6th and 7th edition, so... but if you think about it in grand scheme of things, it's not like they're releasing a bunch of like Rogue Trader stuff or 2nd or 3rd edition stuff. It's basically the previous edition's model range that is still made of plastic. It's not like it's the normal this is the first like made to order stuff in plastic. Normally it's old metal ranges or fine cast stuff. So the fact that they've done this in plastic that's relatively newish is quite good.
There are some really great miniatures in that selection. As I said, the Librarian is amazing. The Sergeant from the Tactical Squad is really good. I mean, if you're looking for a really good standard lieutenant, that guy really does a great job of representing that. I don't like the fact that the Raven Wing bikes are technically sculpted very differently from the standard Raven Wing kits. So they have different styles of wing design and things, which makes them look weird. So you can't just sort of mix old school Raven Wing and these Raven Wing together, which was always a bit frustrating. Plus they were always tilted, but all those things aside, they are gorgeous miniatures, and credit where credit's due to it, the Assault Cannon Terminator is gorgeous as well. And on the Chaos Space Marine side, cultists are cultists, the Chaos Lord is incredible, and the Champion of Chaos, the leader of the, not the leader as such, but the dude with the power maul and holding his helmet under his arms is also very, very good. Although what I will say is they are, all of them, really quite dinky, and they really suffered with miscasts back in the day. I had quite a few of these, and they took a lot of work, especially the Dark Angel Tactical Marines, because the way they were moulded, the Dark Angel iconography, the symbol on their shoulder pad was always horribly miscast. But who knows, maybe they've resolved that. There you go. That's my thoughts on them. But what did you think of the Christmas release, Phil? Were you happy with it?
Well, unlike Joe, I wasn't expecting a Primarch. And I was pretty pleased with the Caldron Overlords for Age of Sigmas. So I wasn't too upset about the somewhat lackluster 40k release. I mean, it sort of is what it is. And absolutely. I sort of think they're probably holding back for the New Year's Day, Open Day sort of reveals. So maybe that's why this one isn't as big as we were potentially hoping for. So yeah, I mean, it's okay. But as Joe said, it's very much this is an every day of the week, or every, their usual releases that you get once a week. This is very similar to that. The mail order stuff is kind of cool. It's a nice little thing that ties it in with the push for Dark Angels. So I like it. It's a bit unusual. Nothing that's wowing me in terms of, oh my god, this is something I want to get myself, because it's very faction specific. So if you're not a Dark Angels player, you're probably not going to care all that much. I mean, always nice to see a new Psychic Awakening animated video as well. So that's quite nice.
Yeah, that was cool. That was actually cool. We didn't really give that much of a shout out, but the whole idea of Magnus's home planet within the warp tearing itself free into real space is definitely interesting from a narrative perspective. So yeah, that should be good. So yeah, that said, expectations high, Joe, for, well, I guess today's New Year's reveal. Are you expecting that Primarch still, buddy? You going to give us a prediction?
Is it today? Was the open day today? Was it?
Well, not today. You know what I'm saying, because this goes out on the Saturday.
Oh yes. Okay.
There you
go. I've now got my timeline sorted out.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have big hopes for it.
Yeah.
We've all seen that weird pixelated dial-up modem picture that was released of what looks like a Primaris land speeder kind of thing, and the potential of some new bikes and a new tank and a new unit of Primaris Marines. They released a stat profile, which was literally the weapon skill, ballistic skill, 3, strength, toughness, 4, 2 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7 and 8, 3 up save, and the angle that the photo's taken at, it shows that they've got frag and crack grenades. It doesn't show you what their movement is and what other weapons they have. And I'm kind of really hoping that they're assault marines.
Well, there you go, Joe.
That's what I want. Give me assault marines.
Lofty expectations there from Joe. So he's expecting to see assault marines, new land speeders and bikes, a whole heap of new Space Marine stuff that managed to get released only 4 or 5 months after the Space Marine book and didn't make its way into it. Well done, GW.
Well, that's how GW operate, though. So, because what they need to do is they need to release units that become not chapter specific units, but units that chapters kind of rely heavily on. Mm-hmm. Like Ultramarines, they've got aggressors kind of thing.
Yeah.
Dark Angels have Hellblasters. The Imperial Fists should have aggressors as well, but they've ended up with Centurions. Mm-hmm. And White Scars have nothing. Well, the unit that benefits the most from their chapter tactic is an attack bike, and
that's true.
And people like Raven Guard should be infiltrators and eliminators, but they've become Centurion assault teams. So,
well, there you go. But yeah, no, I think that's a perfectly reasonable set of expectations, mate. Let's see what happens, I guess, as the day rolls on. But yeah, look, there we are. That's us talking about the Christmas release. On the whole, I mean, for my side of things, I didn't necessarily mind it. I didn't overly love it. Obviously, I ranted and raved a bit about my opinions on Primaris at this point in time because that was probably the most interesting thing to me. But I like Dark Angels. I'm excited to get some rules that will hopefully make Dark Angels as, if not more competitive than other Marines. That would be super cool. But regardless of that, it's really cool to hear that also Grey Knights are potentially going to be getting some tender love and care because they definitely need it. And like Phil, I was actually quite impressed with the Kazron Overlords and the Zench stuff that came from an Age of Sigmar side of things. But yeah, there you go, guys. That's our thoughts and feelings of what happened on the Christmas Day release. Hopefully the New Year's open day will bring us greater treats, and Joe can sleep easy in the knowledge that he was indeed right and Lionel Johnson was not a figment of his deluded mind, but a real thing that he believed in truly. But yeah, thanks very much, guys. We're going to move on now to the next bit, which I imagine will be the outro. But, you know, you never know. So here we go. Transitional noise. Woo! Thank you very much, everyone. That has been episode 37 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. Done and or dusted. The very first podcast of 2020, the brand new decade. Exciting times ahead within all Warhammer 40,000. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Phil, did you enjoy it?
Oh, of course.
Of course, absolutely. If you cannot tell from my, legitimately, genuinely sounding statement, it's the best thing ever, right?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. How many fills out of 10 would you give this one?
Like an 8, like a good solid start, but I think we haven't quite peaked at the best nugget of content that the year will have to offer us.
There you go. They are. There were no Joe goat noises or similar such things that really kind of elevated us to that 10 fill level.
No, not quite.
Not quite. Although, Joe, what was your opinion? How many Joes out of 10 would you give that?
I'll give it a solid 6 or 7. We didn't have enough segues to pointless, arbitrary 90s cartoons, which made me a little bit sad. We'll have to save those up for later.
Well, indeed. It all had to be a little bit more matter of fact today, because for those of you who don't necessarily listen regularly, the usual model is that we record for a few hours every week, and then I chop up everything that we have from a few hours every week, whereas today we had to get it all done in a single session of a few hours, so we didn't have nearly as much time for, the fun and frolics that we try and bring in other episodes, I suppose.
Yeah, but on the good news, it's the first day of the first month, and I've already built a new model, and I'm already painting, so...
You are an inspiration to us all, Joe. That is something that I've always said about you.
I built my first model by 9 o'clock this morning. That's
pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Were you building models to bring in the new year?
No. I was drinking champagne.
Oh, champagne!
Yeah, I say champagne. It was cheap prosecco.
I thought you were going to say it was bleach or something.
Bleach. Yeah.
I say champagne. It was turps. Oh god. Oh dear, oh dear.
Of loneliness.
Quite possibly. But no, I mean, I enjoy getting back into the swing of it. It's weird because last year, the Christmas period kind of knocked us for six a bit, because back then we hadn't really kind of gotten into the regular format of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. We were like, we didn't regularly put out the content. It was sort of 2 times a month, but sometimes it wasn't, and we never really kind of made any commitments as towards when and where they would appear and how that would all work. So a big thing this year, this big thing in 2019 for us was, consolidating ourselves and committing to that every 2-week format that we're still very strongly committed to at this point, despite Richie wanting us to go weekly, which I keep telling him will break me. So I'm like, no, we can't go weekly. It just can't be done. Unless, I don't know. What do you think of weekly still, Phil? We're still dead against it, right? I'm not keen.
No, I think there's very little benefit of it, really.
No, I mean,
it makes you more relevant in terms of being up to date with the new stuff. But I think sort of one of the things we do best is when we're not actually talking about the news and we're just picking up topics that we think are worthy to chat about.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sort of...
Everyone else covers the new instant news, whereas we're just plodding along, just giving people the random content. They don't know they need, and probably don't even need, but they feel that they need it, and then that validates us.
Well, exactly. That's the hope, anyway. I mean, and again, it's been a relatively slow start to the to things in 2020. I think, obviously, it's been a weird one, really, from a hobby perspective of late. I think I'm really excited for the Grand Tournament Finals events. I always really enjoy that. I know we're going to be, all together in an Airbnb for a change of pace as well, which I'm looking forward to. I think that'll be super fun. And it's really great that this year, all three of us, the main Lookout Sir guys, I guess we can call ourselves, are all qualified. So I'm really excited to see how that all goes. I know, Phil, you're probably dreading it slightly, but I think you'll have fun in the end, mate. I think it'll be a good weekend all the same.
I'm sure.
You should have worked a little bit harder on that marine painting challenge, Phil.
And then I could have run that instead. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I'm looking forward to, I've essentially resigned myself to the belief that Joe is going to finish painting this army for me. So yeah, my fate is in Joe's hands now. I'm absolutely, at his mercy. So,
well, like I say, it's a good thing I've spent the last 6 months painting gold.
Well, indeed. No spoilers, I suppose. We'll definitely be talking about that in the next episode. So hopefully, those of you who enjoy our grand tournament coverage will get a kick out of hearing how we got on at the 2020 finals or the 2019 season finals. I don't know how it necessarily works. I mean, again, they've changed up the format as we talked about in the past. So yeah, but I think again we're already eyeing up an event in April, aren't we? There's some team tournament going on.
Yeah, the team tournament seems like a good idea. They haven't put out a rules pack or any information on it yet. So
I remember it's the same as the one last year where you kind of pick an attacker and a defender, or you alternate it somehow.
Is it? It's a 4, but we can use any 4 factions, right?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be good. That'd be exciting. Will it be 2,000 point armies each?
Ooh.
So.
I would imagine they will have mixed it up to 2,000 points each, surely.
Yeah, quite likely.
Might give me an excuse to work on that Aspect Warrior army of mine. But then at the same time, we're also getting into Age of Sigmar after this Grand Tournament Finals is done, aren't we?
Yeah, a bit of a reprieve.
We're going to give it a try. Although we're not going to necessarily massively talk about it on the podcast because we kind of understand that we've kind of built ourselves up as a very specific part of Warhammer and or Warhammer 40,000, so it's not really going to be much of a talking point, but we will occasionally mention.
Do you know what? I think it would be good to do a 40k players play Age of Sigmar, because I think there'll be a lot of people like ourselves that play 40k and have never played Age of Sigmar, and they're a bit like, what's that about? So I think doing a little journey into Age of Sigmar on this podcast will be quite interesting for people. Yeah. I mean, maybe not everyone, and it shouldn't be kind of, a regular segment, but I imagine, because we're trying to, if we are going to do it, we're going to aim to do kind of quarterly milestones. And when that falls on a podcast, I think we should do a bit of a chat about it and talk about our experiences.
No, definitely. I'm just excited about painting trolls. It's ridiculous, right? I've been playing small toy soldiers for way too long. I mean, I got into this hobby when I was 12, 13 years of age, and I'm not that age anymore by quite some margin. And yeah, I've never painted a troll in all the years that I've played Warhammer and or Warhammer related hobbies. I've never painted a troll. Or a goblin, I don't think. Maybe I did some Mines of Moria goblins around the times of Lord of the Rings, but yeah, so that's why I've gone for the Gloomspike Gits. I'm like, how can I have played this for as long as I have and never done goblins? That's what everyone always says, it's trolls and goblins, so you got to get involved in that, right?
That brings me back nightmares from when the Skull Pass box set got released. And I bought 3 boxes because it was all about.
Lord.
It was Horde Hammer back then, so it was like blobs of 40 infantry with a bunch of characters, and I think I painted about 200 goblins in about 2 months.
Wow, man!
And I think I was just done by the end of it. I think I hated the army so much that I only played 1 game of it, and then just got rid of it. Not from the fact that it was a bad army to play with. I just dedicated so much of my time to it. I was just like, I hate these models. I don't want to look at another goblin for as long as I live.
Well, I see. I have the opposite end of it. I've never really ever. Well, I mean, I've painted a few grots in my time, but never an actual goblin. So yeah, no, I'm interested from that side of things, and definitely the trolls and stuff look amazing. I mean, the Gloomspike Gits are such an amazing range. I'm very excited to just sort of, see what I can do with that and see what I can create out of it. You still haven't decided what you're doing yet, have you, Joe? You've sort of been flirting with all sorts of things.
I managed to guilt trip Tim into not do Chaos so I can do it.
You're doing Chaos, are you?
I'm going to do the new Undivided.
Ooh.
because I only agreed to this because I was like, yes, because I want to do the Undivided, because they're the only army that I'm kind of interested in at the moment.
Mm.
And then Tim went out and bought all of the stuff for it. I was just like,
That's scoundrel.
in that case, I'm not doing it now because I can't be a hipster if two of us are doing it.
Mm.
And then he said that he'll go and do Nurgle. So the Undivided is now open for me to do.
And then Phil's doing Cadron Overlords, aren't you, mate? Or have you not decided yet?
I've not decided because it was either going to be them or Lizard Men, because I've already got some Lizard Men that when Age of Sigmar first came out. But I'm sort of waiting on the new 2.0 sort of style battle tomes for both of them to come out. So Cadron Overlords is coming imminently, so that'll be interesting to see what they do, because I got the impression that currently they're very difficult to play and they're not very good.
Yeah, Cadron Overlords, from what I understand, don't get a lot of love because they're well, I think mainly their main issue is their battle line unit is pretty tame, or not tame, but just weird. But I imagine if they make their ships amazing, that's going to be a big one.
They said in in one of the recent posts that they can now shoot out of the ships.
Yeah, so you can garrison your troops inside and shoot out, which seems pretty cool. And they can also do like a fly high move, so they can effectively just deep strike anywhere on the board as a move.
So now they're just Dwarf Dark Eldar now. Is what they are.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
That is pretty amazing. I mean, I'm amazed to hear that they didn't have those abilities already.
I know, you would have thought they would be quite obvious, but not, apparently.
Well, fair enough. But anyway, there you go. That's enough of us talking about that nonsense. So, yeah, guys, obviously, thank you very much for checking out episode 37 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. Please like and subscribe if you're listening to us on YouTube, or maybe consider giving us a 5-star review if you're using one of the platforms that allows you to do that, or generally telling us whether or not you think we're awful, because ultimately, you know, it's always good to know if you don't like us, why you don't like us. Although I imagine if you don't like us all that much, you won't have got to this part of the podcast, unless, of course, you enjoy torturing yourself in some kind of weird way. But nonetheless, that has been episode 37. We thank you very much for listening. On behalf of myself, Phil and Joe, we will say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.